Otherwise, after one trial, wouldn't he become a completely different person? Being able to learn something from a fake simulation is already good enough. Crow shook his head helplessly. Secondly, there are some things that you can upgrade just by working hard. It depends on your talent, okay? Could it be that you have never thought about how everything you do is going smoothly? How ridiculous is it that you have the right time, the right place, and the right people? There are some things that can't be improved just by working hard. Within the limitations of the myriad celestial sphere simulation, Weischer's ability was simply like a cheat code, constantly improving without limit. How could he reach a level that he himself could achieve? If you ask me, you should be satisfied that I left you a little bit. Crow sighed. You still have to thank that little girl for giving you her blessings. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving this little bit behind. And Weischer silently lowered his head, carefully looking at the title page of the Book of Destiny. Even if he had already prepared for it, he was still shocked by the progress of his skills at this moment. Even if they had rapidly shrunk after the simulation ended, the growth now was too frightening. The few skills that he used the most now all shot up like rockets. Alchemy, metal study, LV9. From the original level 4 to level 9 in an instant, it could be said that Weischer had graduated in an instant. LV9 was only one step away from LV10. It could be said that most of the alchemists who did not choose to specialize could not compare to Weischer's level, and the alchemists who chose the same specialization as Weischer might rely on their own experience to barely surpass him. But Weischer still had the sole ability of the imprisoning hand, as well as the assistance of the alchemy fire. With these two bonuses, he could already be regarded as the limit of LV10 for ordinary people. Cello performance LV17. He had risen 2 levels in an instant after surpassing LV10. It could be said that he had entered the realm of true geniuses. To be able to go further, it could only be said that he needed a lot of luck and a lot of time to search and work hard. The further he went, the more difficult it was to go further. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. And to jump from LV15 to LV17 in an instant, even if Weischer knew that he had played the cello for dozens of lifetimes, it was still a little unbelievable. This was all because he had relied on his dripping, water-piercing stone skill to forcefully burst his experience bar. After reaching this level, Weischer estimated in his heart that if he did not count the group of old perverts in the Hell Music Association, then he could be regarded as one of the few Grandmaster-level characters in the present realm. Unfortunately, it was only purely in terms of skills. The classical music industry was not a place where cats and dogs with no background could mix in. Without qualifications, background, and the guidance of an orthodox master as an introducer, it was very difficult to make a living in the circle of aristocrats. If it was a pianist, there might be a place for him to make a name for himself. But for a cello, forget it. At most, he could just change to another accompaniment. Without you, the why musician, would they not play Bach? Today, Weischer's attention to fame and fortune had gradually faded. But what made him even happier was that his skills had improved. There was nothing more wonderful than personally feeling one's own progress. And swordsmanship performance method, which was completely dependent on cello performance, also rose with the tide. As Weischer's cello skill improved, it would naturally rise as well. LV15. Unless he was a natural swordsman who had killed countless people, was proficient in hundreds of weapons, and practiced hard 4 days a year, a genius who could enter such a level after middle age. This was the real successor of the Orchard Gym, although Weischer was just a slacker who had only taken half a month of trial classes. After reaching such an achievement, when he introduced himself as Elder Luo's disciple in the future, he was not afraid of embarrassing Elder Luo. but the basic skills of drumming and you step did not improve much. It was still the same. Hand-to-hand combat was still a shortcoming, and compared to that, it was even worse. But this was something to be considered in the future. Now, the most surprising discovery was illegal organization operation, LV-12. What the hell? Huaisher was stunned. How did this skill improve so much? If he remembered correctly, it seemed to be only at LV-4 or LV-5, at most at the level of a small criminal gang robbing a bank. But now at LV-12, he was afraid that he could go to America to be a smuggler and a drug lord. He was simply a born criminal boss. If Huaisher worked hard, he could even start from scratch in Africa, Australia, or the Middle East and become a big boss in the underworld. But what the F***CK is going on with such an outrageous growth? Why don't you ask yourself? Crow pointed at his book of destiny and sighed. Even in a world without ascendants, you were able to build your own base between the two forces of Rome and the Russian Federation. In such a hellish place, you almost established a country. I knew you idiot was born to be a criminal. Do you want us to work harder? I didn't, don't talk nonsense. Huaisher was flustered when he saw it. Although, yes, the vague memory of working together with senior sister was indeed sentimental. But wasn't this all fake? In addition to these messy skills, even death premonition, a skill that hadn't been used for 10,000 years, seemed to have joined in the fun and become LV2. He died thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. Chapter 472. Hello. After a long silence, he said, This is Huaisher. For a long time, no one spoke, until Huaisher suspected that there was no signal from the astronomy club. A trembling voice came from the other side. Hello. I'm Lily. As if she had almost bitten her tongue, she coughed a few times and hurriedly explained. Just now. It was a misunderstanding. Huaisher was stunned for a long time and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, he didn't know why he began to feel disappointed. I know. He nodded slowly, hearing his quick reply. Lily seemed to be even more anxious. Incoherently, she tried to defend herself. Actually, I don't like it that much. No, it's not that kind of like you think it is. No, I don't. The more she spoke, the lower her voice became. She was so anxious that she almost cried. I know. Huaisher comforted her. Don't worry, she's a friend. I just accidentally bumped into her. I wasn't careless. Lily suddenly raised her voice, interrupting him. But then, as if she was stuck, she quickly lowered her voice and became a vague whisper. In the end, she seemed to have given up. The phone was hung up. Huaisher was stunned and heard the sound of melon seeds falling to the ground. In just a few minutes, a large pile of melon seed shells had been piled up at Crow's feet. She skillfully cracked the melon seeds and watched this good show. Suddenly, she asked with a faint smile, Do you like her? After a long silence, Huaisher shook his head in frustration. I don't know. Shouldn't you know this kind of thing best? Crow asked, Or do you think it's not good? But I didn't do those things for her to like me. Huaisher looked at her and asked matter-of-factly, When you do the right thing, you shouldn't expect such a reward, right? Although I'm very happy, I still feel that it's not right. In the end, was this fondness due to friendship, gratitude, or the experience of adventure? He didn't mind at all. He could accept everything and do whatever he wanted. It was so simple. She trusts you so much and relies on you so much that as long as you show her kindness, she will feel happy and happy. As long as he made a promise, she would believe him unconditionally. He was completely unprepared for all of this. And then, if he encountered the next one, would he continue to act irresponsibly? What was the difference between him and a scumbag? People have to be responsible for what they do. Huaisher raised his head and said seriously to Crow, I didn't work hard to become someone like my parents. Crow was stunned. After a long while, he couldn't help but chuckle softly. He didn't know if he was happy or relieved. Although you're still a scumbag, you've really grown up. She raised her wings in satisfaction and patted Huaisher's head. Hee, Huaisher, I really like you the most. Huaisher's expression suddenly became complicated. He was especially alert and vigilant. Hey, why is the treatment different? Crow became angry. Huaisher rolled his eyes. Hee, how can a pure and beautiful girl be the same as a black-hearted and evil force? TSK, what a pity. Crow shook his head regretfully and said meaningfully, I was going to give you some benefits, the kind that a pure and beautiful girl wouldn't give you. Huaisher sneered. He had long been used to her tricks. A pure and beautiful girl wouldn't give me that. Are you talking about cheating money? Of course, it's like that. A pair of white hands cupped his cheeks and forced him to raise his head, not allowing him to refuse. Unknowingly, a gentle breath was already close to him. There was a faint fragrance lingering at the tip of his nose. Huaisher stood rooted to the ground, staring blankly at her face as it inched closer and closer, bit by bit, but her mind went blank. He had never seen her face so closely before. It was as beautiful as the world, charming and dignified, as awe-inspiring as the sun. It was destined to shine on all things, not allowing anyone to refuse. Also not allowing him to refuse this gift that belonged to him. In a trance, the illusion suddenly dissipated. Huaisher woke up from his daze and felt a sudden pain on his lips. It seemed like he was poked by something. Yes, it was a slender and sharp beak. Sorry, I used up my transformation time, Crow said awkwardly. Let's do it again next time, okay? After a long time, Huaisher finally reacted. He lowered his head blankly and looked at the innocent little crow in front of him. He was played by this shameless woman again. He reached out without hesitation and fiercely grabbed her. Then he pointed the gun at her face. He wished he could take a picture of the scene, just now, and put it in front of her. Change for me. Don't be so fierce. Crow looked around and said, Aren't we progressing too fast? According to common sense, we should have a sweet relationship first. Damn it, how dare you deceive the feelings of an innocent boy? Who would fall in love with a black-hearted woman like you? Huaisher pulled the trigger. Die for me. Bang! A high-pitched gunshot rang out. In the end, after the gun in Huaisher's hand exploded into a ball of ink, it condensed again on Huaisher's shoulder with a helpless expression. It raised its wings and patted his head, saying earnestly, Sorry, Huaisher, the adult world is so cruel. See, if you don't seize the opportunity, this benefit is gone. After being messed around by her, Huaisher was so angry that she couldn't be bothered to talk to her about it anymore. Anyway, he couldn't win against her. But for the 1080th time, he made up his mind. Don't bully a poor boy. 30 years on the surface of the river. 30 years at the bottom of the river. I'll let her be proud for now. When I'm stronger than her, she'll know how wrong she was in the past. The effect of the spiritual victory was very strong, and he finally calmed down. In the end, it was just a tease. It wasn't the first time, so he didn't take it to heart. He just thought that this black-hearted woman's bad taste was acting up again, and he was being played by her. Under this kind of guidance, his originally depressed mood finally improved a lot. After packing up his things, he pushed open the door again and saw the blizzard outside. In the snow, next to the bonfire, a sled and a few bored sled dogs were still waiting patiently. When they saw him come out, they immediately barked. But this time, Huaisher couldn't understand what they were saying. Huaisher took a last deep look at the door behind him, closed the door again, and said goodbye to this place. After feeding the sled dogs, he rested for a while, put away the bonfire, and set off in the direction he came from. Crow landed on his shoulder, tilted its head and looked at Weischer's serious face, pretending to be angry and ignoring it, and suddenly asked, "Speaking of which, after experiencing so much in the new world, did you learn anything?" "A little." Weischer thought for a while and said helplessly, "But it seems like I can't say it." "That's normal." Crow sighed. "Most of life is like this. You feel that you have learned something, but after a while, you will find that it is just your illusion. This world is bigger than anyone expected, and there are so many changes. Those who dare to say that they have figured it out are either near the end of their lives and have no strength to move forward. Either that, or they've given up on themselves and deceived themselves." "It doesn't matter if I don't understand it?" Weischer asked. He originally thought that Crow wanted him to think about a result, but he didn't expect that she didn't care at all. "What's there to understand?" Crow looked at him seriously. "If you don't understand, then don't understand." "Weischer, as long as you can continue to think, it's fine. The only thing I care about is your life now, and your life in the new world. Will it make you happy?" After a short silence, Weischer faced the wind and snow and smiled. "Yes, I am very happy," he said. "Whether it is in reality or in all the branches in the new world, seeing other people's smiles makes me happy. Knowing that my existence can make them live better, I will be happy." "Ha ha, you are really incorrigible." Crow chuckled softly and said, "Out of all the choices, is there any that you like? So many lives, so many directions. Weischer, which one will you choose?" "It's hard to say." Weischer thought for a while and said honestly, "I like most of them." "You have to choose one, right? There is only one way for adults to choose, right?" Weischer raised her head without any shame and told her, "What?" "I want them all." Crow was speechless. Oi, where did you learn to make such an unreasonable choice?" "Haha, didn't you teach me this?" Chapter 473. Accompanied by the flying snow, the person who rushed down from the mountain pushed open the door and was swept into a bone-piercing cold wind from outside. A man wearing a thick and long-down jacket jumped a few times in front of the hot air from the air conditioner. He shivered before he breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing the person reading the newspaper in the gatehouse, he was stunned. "Brother who, you're already here?" "I'm used to waking up early." The person reading the newspaper poured him a cup of hot tea. Lu Yen shivered, picked up the teacup, and asked, "What's the date today?" "November 29th, the person reading the newspaper said. "It's already so cold in November?" Lu Yen sucked in a breath of cold air. "You just arrived?" The person reading the newspaper smiled. "Yes, I was assigned here in autumn." "You'll get used to it in the future." He said, "Mount Diyu is not a good place for a vacation. It's hot in summer and cold in winter. Insects are everywhere in spring, and there's endless work in autumn. To be honest, before I came, I thought Mount Diyu was like spring all year round." "Ha ha ha, that's just a lie. There are always people who know that this is a plantation in Dongsha and think that the scenery here is beautiful and the climate is pleasant. In fact, it's not the same thing. Yes, it's still like this, but it's different now." "Why?" Lu Yen asked. He looked up at the gray sky outside the window, as if he could see the framework set by the Creator. "Can it be adjusted?" "Yes, it was deliberately adjusted like this." Hu Jing put away the newspaper and said, "The old lady likes it." When it came to the old lady, Lu Yen had nothing to say, who asked her to be older and more powerful than anyone else. Even Xian Miao didn't dare to go against her. In front of her, everyone was a junior. "Let me teach you a lesson." Hu Jing, who was in charge of guiding Lu Yen, smiled. "The old lady is more extreme." Instead of pretending to be like spring all year round, it's better to show the harsh nature of the four seasons. The former environment can only grow weeds, but the real talent never cares about the lack of spring wind and rain. You understand? I understand. Lu Yen nodded. Even if you don't understand, you have to pretend to understand. If you don't understand, you have to remember. There will come a time when you understand. Hu Jing glanced at him, who was still in a daze, and picked up the newspaper again. Rest for a while. We'll be busy later. I asked you to come down from the shed, not to sit down and drink tea. What is it? Lu Yen asked, looking at the heavy snow outside. His face turned a little green. It can't be the same as 2 days ago, right? Welcome. Hu Jing said, originally I didn't need you, but I see that you're quite free. Why don't you come and see the world with me? If you stop flirting online, Old One won't let you sweep the snow every few days. Amazing, Lu Yan's face turned green. It was unknown whether he was silently criticizing Lao Wang or complaining about his teacher, but there was nothing much to say. Which newbie didn't serve tea and water? In the future, when the newcomers came, he would do the same. Other than plucking weeds and planting flowers every day, this was the only entertainment left in the mountains. Rather than saying that this made him unhappy, it was better to say that it was a visitor that his master had mentioned. This is the third one this month. Lu Yen clicked his tongue. Why are there so many people recently? It's a last-minute addition. Can't the leaders empathize with the people working overtime? Lu Yen complained in a bad mood. He slumped on the sofa, completely devoid of energy. In any case, he had worked here for 3 to 4 months. He still didn't know what kind of people came to Mount Yudai. Other than workers like him who were in charge of maintenance, the people who came here were all sheep farmers. They were jealous of the precious materials that covered the mountains. It was fine if they took cards to eat, but if they couldn't eat, they had to carry them. Even if they couldn't touch the high-level abyss plants, they would ruthlessly hang the basic materials that Lu Yen and the rest were in charge of. Who asked Mount Tai to be so rich in earth energy? The calamity plants of the abyss grew here like chives. This month, Lu Yen was already annoyed by the 2 ugly fellows who ate in front of him. Regarding his complaints, Hu Jing didn't say anything. He only gave him a reminder. Later, be more respectful. It doesn't matter if it's official business. Don't throw a tantrum. Huh. They're from the astronomy club, the master said. They're guests that old madam invited. Lu Yen didn't care about the former, but the latter stunned him. Old madam had been living in seclusion all these years. He had been in Mount Yudai for so long, but he had only seen her once. Even now, when he thought of old madam's harsh gaze, he felt his legs go weak. A guest that old madam invited. Just thinking about it made him feel a little guilty. Sometimes such important people were even more difficult to deal with than little ghosts. As long as the latter was dealt with properly, it wouldn't be a problem. Whether they were good or bad had nothing to do with him. However, serving such a high and mighty figure might not be beneficial. If he were to offend him, his future days would be a little difficult. According to young Master Chu, if he doesn't want to work at the astronomy club and comes to Dongsha, then he will immediately become old madam's personal student. Hu Jing wanted to say more, but 2 car lights suddenly lit up in the snow outside the gatehouse at the foot of the mountain. A car broke through the wind and snow without warning and arrived here. It didn't directly drive in. Instead, it stopped a distance away. Huaishir looked at the air conditioning inside and was about to die of envy. Can't you let me drink some hot water? Huaishir asked. What? Hu Jing turned around and shouted. Hot water. Huaishir roared in the roaring cold wind. Hot water. Heater. It's freezing. It's available on the mountain. Hu Jing replied loudly. There's no time for you to rest. The old lady wants to see you. She said that you should go up the mountain as soon as you arrive." After shouting 3 times, Huaisher finally heard clearly. He almost couldn't feel where his face was. It was too cold. But under the surrounding snow and ice, the vitality of the plants was extremely abundant. They crazily pulled at his stigmata, as if they wanted him to be immediately assimilated by the countless crazy vitality, take root immediately, and stay here forever. Huaisher was almost unable to maintain the stability of the ecosystem in his body, not to mention changing to a more cold-adapted ecosystem at this time. If he dared to do so, he was afraid that in the short moment when the ecosystem collapsed, he would immediately be assimilated here. Something was wrong. Completely wrong. A naturally formed ecology would not have such a terrifying assimilation, nor would it display such an abrupt and fanatical enthusiasm. Huaisher closed his eyes. Through the snow and ice, he could feel the mighty echoes in the depths of the earth veins, as well as the bell-like roaring rhythm from the top of the mountain. All the vitality was under the control of that invisible hand. Someone was deliberately targeting him. Huaisher's footsteps paused as she stared straight into the eyes of the two fellows, almost suspecting that she was being played. "Who is the old lady?" he asked. "I've never heard of her." The two guys suddenly looked as if they had seen a ghost. "You came to Mount Yudai, but you don't know who the old lady is?" Hu Jing was also stunned. "Friend, do you have a problem with us?" If it were not for the old lady's approval, he would almost suspect that Huaisher was trying to make trouble. "You don't know the current Emperor Qing?" Hu Jing looked at him as if he had seen a ghost. He really couldn't figure out what kind of person this little brother of his was. But soon, the phone in his arms rang. He ran to a corner sheltered from the wind and squatted down to answer the call. Soon after the call was hung up, he ran back with a strange expression. Huaisher felt that he had frozen into a snowman beside the memorial arch at the foot of the mountain road. Anyway, there was no wind here, so he didn't have to shout to talk. He really couldn't figure out why the current Emperor Qing wanted to make things difficult for him without even meeting him. He thought, "I've never offended such a big shot, right?" But when he thought of this, he felt very guilty. He had offended too many people. Who knew if any of them were related to the Emperor Qing? Living under someone else's roof, no matter what brand of eye drops you were given, what size shoes you were given, how could you still refuse to wear them? But at least let him know why he died, right? Hu Jing came back with a complicated expression. He looked at Huaisher with a pitiful expression. "What's wrong?" Huaisher felt that something was wrong. Hu Jing coughed twice and repeated the words on the phone. "The old lady said that Chu Hongchen used my things to do a favor for him. I don't agree." Huh. Huaisher was stunned. Why did he change his mind again? But then Hu Jing changed the topic. "If you can reach the top of the mountain and see her face, you can take whatever you want. If you can't even see the old lady in person, please go back." Huaisher looked around and felt that the deeper he went, the more exuberant the vitality was. There was a terrifying ecological circle with incomparable assimilation power. He couldn't help but sigh. The old lady has a bad temper. That's right. The old lady is like this. She means what she says. Hu Jing shook his head and said, "Do you want to go back? I'll send you back." Huaisher thought carefully for a long time and suddenly answered, "I'll try." If the Emperor Qing had refused Huaisher's arrival before, Huaisher might not have continued to pester him. There were so many plantations. Although it was troublesome to go through the Astronomy Association, it was not impossible to find. But now that the old lady had set up a carriage in front of him, he was a little eager to have a try. Seeing his serious look, Hu Jing nodded, as if he had expected it. He pointed to the back and said, "Then we'll go back first." Wait! He had just taken 2 steps when he heard Huaisher say, Leave a down jacket for me first. Otherwise, I'll freeze to death here today." He was stunned for a moment. He looked at Huai Shi and couldn't help but look at the newcomer next to him, who might be too warm. He revealed a frightening smile. "Lu Yan, give your down jacket to the guest." Therefore, Lu Yan's face turned even more green. He knew that nothing good would come here today. According to the surveillance footage that Hu Jing and Lu Yan saw when they were drinking tea and enjoying the air conditioner in the gatehouse, Huai Shi had been squatting under the memorial arch for 2 hours. Well, with the down jacket that he took from Lu Yan, he finally felt a little warmer. He didn't move forward or backward. It was as if he had made up his mind to stay here and not move. In fact, during these 2 hours, he had been trying to reorganize the vitality of the surrounding plants. However, the vitality of Mount Yudai was simply too rich. It was like a ball of tangled hemp that had once entangled him here. It couldn't be cut or organized, especially when the vitality of the same kind in his body was responding to the outside world, trying to connect with it. For a moment, most of the vitality in his body seemed to have turned into a traitor. It couldn't be helped. This was the instinct of a mountain ghost. If he couldn't connect with the outside world, how could he adjust the ecology and absorb the earth energy? It could be said that this was a trap specially made for mountain ghosts. If it were other types of stigmata, there wouldn't be such trouble. However, for Huai Shi, the closer he went to Mount Yudai, the closer he was to a hopeless situation. Perhaps this was just a casual move by the Qing Emperor, but it left an insurmountable chasm in front of Huai Shi. He had no choice but to take a step back. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, but if you can't even go up the mountain, you can't get it, right? He was more and more certain that he must have offended that old lady somehow. However, the problem now was how to solve the problem in front of him. Even when Huai Shi was so cold that he couldn't feel his butt anymore, he still couldn't think of a solution. It was useless to think too much. He had to give it a try. Under all the observation, the young man who had been wandering in front of the mountain gate for a long time got up, jumped up, and did a set of broadcast gymnastics on the spot. After exercising his body, he took a deep breath. Suddenly, he turned around and asked, "Where's the toilet? I want to pee." Uffed. Hu Jing, who was in front of the screen, spat out a mouthful of tea. Lu Yan, who had been sprayed in the face as soon as he looked up, became more and more annoyed. "Why do you have to turn around and spray me? Ahem, the screen is also very expensive, okay?" Hu Jing looked away, awkwardly. Soon, Huai Shi, who had gone to the toilet, returned to his original position and took a deep breath again. Then he took a step forward. He left a deep footprint in the snow. Then he took another step, a third step, and a fourth step. As the storm gradually stopped, there was the crisp sound of branches breaking under the snow all over the ground. After walking for 100 meters, Huai Shi froze on the spot. The crackling sound was incessant. Huai Shi could no longer take another step forward. On his exposed fingers, the circles in the fingerprints had become the texture of tree rings. It was exactly 17.5 circles. He couldn't go any further. The pressure from Mount Tai was too great. The ecosystem in his body couldn't take it anymore. If he took a few more steps forward, he was afraid that it would completely collapse, and then he would uncontrollably turn into a tree. Even if the Lotus Emperor was right above him and wouldn't let his condition deteriorate, he would at least lose his face. Brute force wouldn't work. There seemed to be an old voice reminding him in his ears. Huai Shi sighed dejectedly. He took a step back, and then another. He took a step back, and then another step back. It was as if he was rowing against the current. Chapter 474. Little brats these days, they're too daring. After a brief moment of shock, the old woman on the recliner narrowed her eyes. She wasn't angry because a certain shameless brat was secretly learning from her. Instead, she raised her finger and knocked on the armrest unhappily, as if she had seen a student flipping through their notes during an exam. If you want to learn, you should learn well. Huaisha heard a loud boom. Under the layers of snow, a loud boom came from the huge circulation of Mount Yudai. It sounded like the sound of a bell, and the tide surged. In an instant, countless plants withered and grew. As the earth veins changed, the huge network of vitality suddenly changed. The originally turbulent undercurrent turned into a stormy sea. Huaisha's body suddenly shrank by tens of centimeters. His feet were almost sunk into the soil under the snow by the invisible pressure. Without hiding her actions, the Lotus Empress moved her finger, and the suppression of the entire Mount Yudai turned from the dark to the light. The pressure increased several times out of nowhere. Yudai Mountain was now covered in snow, and countless plants were growing. As the chi of the earth rose, the life force under the snow silently flowed and gathered in one place, forming an invisible and majestic city pass. It was imposing and imposing. It was like an old woman giving a severe blow to the younger generation. You can steal chickens or dogs as you wish. It doesn't matter if you secretly learn or learn from others. There's no need to deceive yourself. As long as you can come up, you can use any means. Putting aside the pressure that came out of nowhere, the Qing Emperor's magnanimity and boldness made Huaisha feel slightly ashamed. It was like a child's trick being exposed by an old woman. It was really embarrassing, but since she allowed him to learn as he pleased under the pressure of the towering mountain, Huaisha's eyes couldn't help but light up. The huge Mount Yudai included hundreds of thousands of abyssal plants from the entire present realm and the abyss. Thousands of different ecosystems had hundreds of different combinations and changes. In the end, the monarch, minister, assistant, and envoy formed a huge cycle without any loopholes or flaws. Even if it wasn't deliberately hostile, just its existence here made it difficult for Huaisha to move around due to the isolation and assimilation of its system. But what did it matter? It was just a little uncomfortable. Compared to the huge system in front of him now, it was not even worth mentioning. The pressure brought about by the change from the dark to the light was not small, but after no longer hiding, the operating mechanism was completely open to Huaisha, an outsider, for him to use as a reference. If Emperor Qing had even the slightest bit of dissatisfaction and hostility towards Huaisha, he would not have been so lenient. "Thank you for your kindness, old madam." Huaisha raised his head and shouted towards the mountain. The vast, snowy mountain swallowed up Huaisha's voice. He didn't know if his gratitude had been conveyed, but after a long time, there was still no reply. It was obvious that the old lady was too lazy to bother with him. The test questions, the theory, and the derivation process are all in your hands. You're so embarrassing that if you don't even know how to copy, you'd better hurry up and go home. The young girl beside the rocking chair looked over. The old lady isn't angry? Am I not angry? The old man on the rocking chair snorted coldly. I have to let the little brats suffer a little. The girl laughed. But you've given me quite a lot of benefits, haven't you? What else? Are you going to expel him from Mount Tai? Emperor Qing asked. If the person who came today was a hooligan in his 30s or 40s, I would just beat him up. But I'm a 200-year-old old lady. Do you think I'm going to be angry with a 17-year-old child? If I really liked to get angry, I would have hung you up and beaten you to death long ago, so that you don't annoy me all day long. Ha ha! The old lady is stubborn but soft-hearted. The girl laughed and tucked the blanket on the old lady's legs. I'm going to prepare lunch. Does the old lady want to eat porridge? What porridge? Your old lady wants to eat meat. The old lady on the rocking chair glared at her. After seeing the girl laughing and walking away, she retracted her gaze and closed her eyes. She rocked back and forth on the rocking chair, as if she was asleep. Beside her, the withered plum blossoms in the courtyard quietly welcomed the snow falling from the sky. Strands of tender shoots glowed with a hint of novelty. They were waiting for the coldest time of winter to arrive. By the time Huaishe reached the halfway point of the mountain, it was already afternoon. In any case, it was impossible to tell the color of the sky. It was always gray. The fact that he had made it this far meant that he had pretty much stolen all of the chickens. Almost all of the origin substances that could be discarded or simplified had been destroyed by him. All that was left was the rare life force that he had collected from the various infernal realms. The mountain ghost sacred mark had shrunk by half, reaching its lowest level in history. However, Huaishe's expression didn't become dispirited. Instead, he became more and more excited and happy. The more he wanted to climb, the more he could sense and experience. The more he realized that he had made a mistake, the more mistakes he had made. Perhaps others would have thought that this was something that they could only wish for, but if they were obsessed with the details, they would overlook the bigger picture. Along the way, there were many plants with contradictory natures on Mount Yudai, and quite a few of them had natural enemies. But now they were able to find a place in such a huge cycle. Although there was no conflict between them, they all belonged to the same main axis. They seemed to be inextricably linked and difficult to organize, but in reality, if one looked at the whole picture, they were clearly organized and orderly. Under this layout that encompassed all things were orderly, circulating without slacking off, and operating as usual. Even though it changed unpredictably, its essence remained the same from beginning to end, with a clear primary and secondary. Even though it didn't feel overbearing, Huaishe admired its boldness of being prepared for everything. After understanding this point, Huaishe's speed of climbing up the mountain became much faster. Through constant adjustments and changes to the ecosystem in his body, Huaishe's progress was unbelievably fast in just an hour. The mountain ghost sacred mark in his body had undergone a qualitative change, as if it had been reborn. He climbed step by step. In just 2 hours, the originally unapproachable mountain peak, which was like a mirage, was already within reach. He was only 1 step away. However, Huaishe was frozen in place. He felt that something wasn't quite right. He was only 1 step away. He could almost see the old man taking a nap in the hallway in the courtyard. She only existed there, but it gave Huaishe a terrifying pressure, as if the entire Mount Yudai was surrounding her. At that moment, Huaishe suddenly realized something. He took a step back, and then another. Even though it was easy for him to take this step, he couldn't help but stagger back. It was difficult for him to take the last step. He had walked into the wrong place again. Wrong, very wrong. Even though they were both mountain ghosts, they were different. The Azure Emperor was the Lord of Life in the infinite worlds. He was the ruler of life and death, and he had the solemn aura of an overlord. However, when he was immersed in it, he forgot that he was not walking the path of the Azure Emperor. His mountain ghost wasn't aiming for the path of Fusang, Gomang, and the Qing Emperor. It was the path of Heaven's Inquisition. It wasn't a problem to have a monarch and his subordinates. However, only the Qing Emperor himself could unleash the greatest power of this path. The closer he was to this path, the further he would be from the path of Heaven's Inquisition. Unknowingly, Huaishe was bewitched by the immense pressure of Mount Yudai. He almost turned and joined the Eastern Xia lineage under the old lady's guidance. But how could he have any complaints? He had given you so many benefits and even showed you the entire great circulation of Mount Tai. Yet you couldn't control yourself and walked on the path of the Azure Emperor. How could you blame him for that? Huaishe retreated step by step until he was back at the foot of the mountain. He couldn't help but wipe off his cold sweat. He finally felt a strong sense of respect for this old-school fifth-level master. He didn't dare to face her with a frivolous attitude anymore. One had to know that thunder and rain were the grace of the monarch. The old lady's overt schemes and overbearing nature were truly powerful. If it weren't for the fact that Huaishur was used to courting death and wasn't used to simple difficulties, he would have become the old bodhisattva's servant today. Huaishur panted for a moment and rested for a while. He wiped off the sweat that was about to freeze on his forehead. He didn't leave in a hurry. Instead, he went up the mountain again. He was challenging the challenge set by the current Qing emperor. In the courtyard, the old lady who was taking an afternoon nap looked up thoughtfully. She knocked on the armrest of the rocking chair and sighed regretfully. Then she ignored him. Indeed, Huaishur didn't know how to appreciate favors. However, how could she not be more lenient towards such a talent who wasn't afraid of the harsh weather? Such a beautiful piece of jade. No matter where she was, she should be praised and supported. Let him be, half regretful and half helpless. The old lady shook her head and sighed softly. Then she lowered her eyes. Huaishur stepped onto the mountain again. This time, the mountain ghost's sacred mark changed again. After retracting all his sharpness, he actually allowed the great circulation of Mount Yudai to assimilate him. However, within the great circulation of Mount Yudai, the countless life forces in the ecosystem actively responded to the outside world. Along the way, he picked up the flowers and plants that he had abandoned. He also took the initiative to plant some things that he didn't need or could use here. He didn't plunder or invade. Instead, he coordinated and communicated. As a communicator, he calmly faced the pull of the countless surging life forces in Mount Yudai. He allowed his relatives to chat and pester him passionately while he answered calmly. He took the initiative to integrate himself into the great circulation of Mount Yudai. With the previous two experiences, it was easier to try again. At first, it was a little difficult. However, in the end, Huaishur's steps became lighter and his movements were faster. He walked with ease amidst the layers of pressure. It was as if he had finally integrated himself into the local outsider. Even if there was still some estrangement, it wouldn't be too difficult for him anymore. Just like that, it was like he was strolling. After 3 attempts, Huaishur finally reached the peak of Mount Yudai and walked into the courtyard. However, he saw an empty reclining chair. There was no one here anymore. Huaishur was stunned. He raised his head and saw the stars in the sky as the dark clouds dispersed. It was already late at night. He suddenly smiled. She raised her voice slightly and called the girl who was watching from afar. "Since the guest is here, let's show him around. Let him take whatever he wants to eat." Zhu Shuang nodded and looked at Huaishur curiously. She gestured for him to follow her. After they left, the old lady lay on the chair and quietly basked in the rare sunlight in winter with the withered plum beside her. "I'm old after all." In the silence, the old lady listened to the footsteps and couldn't help but chuckle. Finally, a trace of warmth and kindness appeared in her cold and serious face. "It's good to be young." From that day on, there were no peaceful days in Mount Yudai. It lasted until a week later. In the midst of the explosion of earth chi, Lu Yen, who was hard at work shoveling snow, wiped the sweat off his face. He looked up at the countless changes on the top of the mountain and couldn't help but sigh. "Why isn't it over yet?" "It's none of your business. Just shovel the snow." In the gatehouse, Hu Jing crossed his legs and happily drank hot tea while reading a newspaper. He read a cup of tea, a cigarette, and a newspaper for a day. There were also newcomers to bully. There was nothing to say about these days. Before he could finish reading the front page of Tomorrow's News, he felt the entire roof tremble. He was stunned for a moment. He closed the newspaper and looked out the window as he yelled, "Lu Yen, what are you doing?" "It's not me," Lu Yen angrily replied. "Look for yourself." Lu Yen didn't need to say anything. Hu Jing had already seen it. A streak of jade-green light shot into the sky from the top of Mount Yudai, constantly changing its shape. This was a miracle created by the interweaving of countless life forms. After a long period of preparation, a qualitative change had finally occurred. Someone had advanced. Who was it? Hu Jing thought to himself in disbelief. Suddenly, he thought of the figure that had climbed up Mount Yudai a week ago. It was him. It couldn't be, right? How could he have advanced so quickly? At the top of the mountain, Zhu Shuang stared at Huai Shi with a numb expression. Again, as the green light surged, violent origin substance fluctuations surged from Huai Shi's body and spread in all directions, forming a massive storm. Countless green sprouts began to grow out of the snowy ground. The entire Mount Yudai seemed to be responding to Huai Shi's surging life force, sending countless strands of light into Huai Shi's body in an attempt to lend him a helping hand. But the problem was, this wasn't the first time this guy had shown signs of advancing in the past few days. Over the past few days, Huai Shi had been feasting on everything that came his way. He had practically devoured all of the treasures in Mount Yudai, as well as all of the laboratories and secret stashes. Logically speaking, he should have hung himself a long time ago and stepped onto the path of the Azure Emperor. The problem was, however, that every time he was about to advance, he would restrain himself. At this moment, Huai Shi took a deep breath. That straight ray of dim light suddenly stopped. Then, inch by inch, it began to shrink back. It was as if it was extremely unwilling, but it was being forcefully pulled back into Huai Shi's body and locked in place by the sacred mountain ghost mark. I can't advance. I can't just advance like this. If I make a mistake, I'll really become a traitor of the celestial genealogy and betray the sect. Huai Shi's face turned dark green. His entire body seemed to have become rounder. After holding it in for a long time, he couldn't help but burp. He smiled at Zhu Shuang. "I'm done. I'm not done." Zhu Shuang glared at him in frustration. She had accompanied this guy for a week. She was about to take the postgraduate entrance exam and had even delayed her revision. Why hadn't this guy advanced yet? Huai Shi seemed to have eaten too much. He held his stomach in place. After a long time, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Okay, here's enough. He wiped his mouth reluctantly. He had really reached his limit. He couldn't eat any more. If he ate any more, he wouldn't be able to hold it in and would advance on the spot. If it wasn't for the birth of life, how could he eat so much? The birth of life was essentially the gradual control of one's own state through the comprehension of life. Just like how there were big and small comprehensions, it allowed an android creator who didn't originally exist in this world to completely become a member of the present world. The huge comprehension brought about by this correction value was incomparable to giving birth to a child. Of course, there was the approval of the White Crown King and the assistance of the three wise men. However, the absolute leading role was Huai Shi himself. Therefore, the effect brought about by this comprehension was exceptionally huge. Today, Huai Shi's control of the vitality in his body and his own state had reached a perfect level. His control of the heartbeat, the operation of his lungs, and the texture of his skin were only the outermost manifestations. His absolute control of the stigmata and the soul was already close to the theoretical limit. It was because of this that he could eat so much on Mount Yudai. He ate until Zhu Shuang started to doubt life. Now, as Huai Shi opened his palm, Zhu Shuang watched in disbelief. Countless vitality quietly emerged and intertwined, outlining the vague outline of the great circulation of Mount Udai. It formed a scaled-down model of Mount Udai that was tens of thousands of times smaller. In other words, Huaishur had been eating here and there these days. He had actually gathered the conditions to form the entire great circulation of Mount Udai. But then the projection in Huaishur's hand suddenly dissipated. Like the spring wind and rain, it quietly entered the overall great circulation of Mount Udai again. Zhu Shuang started to doubt life again. This performance was truly shocking. At this level, as long as the Lotus Emperor nodded, he could immediately interfere with the entire great circulation. In other words, he had created an administrator's authority out of thin air. Old madam, if this bastard doesn't leave now, not to mention the chickens and dogs, our house will be stolen. Sensing the hidden horror in Zhu Shuang's eyes, Huaishur's psychological need to pretend to be ignorant was once again satisfied. He was about to say something when his vision suddenly blurred. He appeared at the foot of the mountain. Old madam was chasing him away. Since you're full, get out of here quickly. Thank you for your hospitality. I'm leaving. Huaishur held back his laughter and waved goodbye. Then he turned around and tripped over a tree root. He fell hard, and his entire face slammed into the frozen ground. Smack! Huaishur awkwardly got up and rubbed his face helplessly. He smiled bitterly and put his palms together to beg for mercy. Then he hurriedly left. This old madam's temper is really bad. He walked directly to the border transit station of the Social Security Bureau. It was afternoon when he returned to the Stone Marrow Hall. As soon as Huaishur entered, he saw Crow lying lazily on the sofa, basking in the sun. It was not rare for this woman to be lazy. What was rare was that she actually transformed into a human again. Her posture was charming and languid. It was hard to take one's eyes off her. What's wrong with you? Huaishur was shocked. He became alert again. Are you thinking of giving out benefits again? His mouth hurt when he thought of the benefits he received last time. This woman's conscience was really bad. He had to be on guard. But then he saw the 2 iron boxes on the coffee table that Crow stood on tiptoe. He suddenly understood. Is the thing here? The first box was opened. Inside the glass bottle was a piece of amber about the size of a fist. There was a pale flame burning quietly inside. Sensing Huaishur's gaze, the flame moved towards him. If it were not for the bottle, Huaishur even suspected that the flame would follow his line of sight and burn him. As for the second chest, it was filled with a bloody light that made Huaishur shudder. In the middle of layers of silver ropes, a palm-sized blood-colored crystal flowed, with rich scarlet. Just by looking at it, one could feel the monstrous waves of blood surging toward them. Huaishur felt suffocated. Then Crow took out 2 more boxes. One box contained the divine light of grace. As for the other box, it contained the remains of the evil creature. The 4 materials were ready, and the birth of life, the truth of nothingness, the link of souls, and yesterday's illusion, the 4 conditions were completely prepared. Huaishur's mountain ghost's holy mark had also grown to its limit. With a crisp knock on the door, the express delivery from the Stoneware Association arrived in front of Huaishur's door. It was a reward from the Asian rookie competition. In the huge box, all the materials needed to advance to young arbiter of life were neatly arranged. All the materials were processed with the highest standards, and more than 2 portions were prepared. When Huaishur walked into the basement, he saw a solemn scene that was completely different from the past. Countless complicated alchemy runes were shrouded in a secret device. As Fang Shu closed the door behind Huaishur, in the silence, Crow behind the secret device looked back and revealed a strange smile that made him uneasy. What are you waiting for? Huaishur, take off your clothes." She happily rubbed her hands and said expectantly, "Before you advance, let me see if your development is normal." Chapter 476. The Darkest Day. Huaishir didn't need someone to appraise him. He was certain that his development was normal. Moreover, Huaishir's attainments in alchemy had already surpassed the level of a novice. This kind of nonsense of he must be completely naked for an important ceremony could not fool him. Indeed, too much clothing would interfere with the secret device. However, if it was only a layer of linen, the interference would be negligible. After taking a shower, Huaishir changed into shorts and walked out. He did not give Crow any chance to use the phone in her hand. Otherwise, who knew how much money she would extort from him? It was impossible. Crow was not angry. After throwing away the phone, she carefully observed Huaishir. Layers of dark green capillaries had already protruded from under his pale skin. At first glance, they looked like strange tattoos. The layers of complex, root-like mountain ghost sacred marks were constantly changing, pulsing together with Huaishir's heartbeat. From the crack in his chest, it spread out and covered his whole body. It then overlapped on Huaishir's back, forming a vague outline of Mount Yudai. However, this silhouette was constantly changing. Only after the faint light had circulated for a full cycle would its appearance appear for a short period of time. Good. I was worried that you would take a wrong path. Crow stretched out her hand and poked the sacred marks on Huaishir's back. She nodded with satisfaction. For the path of Heaven's Inquisition, the Ein Soul is the foundation, laying the foundation of life from death. But Mountain Ghost is an extension, like a messenger that communicates the inside and outside. In alchemy, it rises from the ground and descends from the sky. The first half of the sentence can summarize the role of Mountain Ghost, born from death, reproducing from the ground. It is the bridge between life and death, the pillar that maintains the balance. Being able to do this is already enough. Anything else is just icing on the cake. If you are confused by the amount of power, the loss will outweigh the gain. After saying that, she raised her hand and unceremoniously slapped Huaishir's back. A slap sounded. It almost left a red mark. "Lie down obediently." She pressed down on Huaishir's shoulder. She didn't use much strength, but Huaishir's vision blurred, and he found himself lying on the ground. He saw the ceiling above him and Crow's eyes looking down at him. He was stunned for a moment. So fast. Yes. She smiled and nodded. So soon? Why are you in such a hurry? Huaishir was puzzled. He had just returned home and didn't even have time to catch his breath before Crow brought him to the basement. He couldn't understand why they were in such a hurry. As the saying goes, it's better to be on time than to be early. You've come at the right time. Crow smiled and waved his hand. He bent down and pulled out the sacrificial knife from Huaishir's stigmata. He pressed down on Huaishir's hands and feet and cut them open one by one. Immediately, faint green blood flowed out from Huaishir's outstretched hands and feet. It spread along the complicated array below him and gradually covered the entire secret apparatus. He didn't feel weak at all. Instead, he felt like he had high blood pressure. After letting out some blood, Huaishir felt much lighter. Previously, he had eaten too much at Mount Tai and had indigestion. Now that he had released the excessive vitality, the mountain ghost stigmata was able to operate smoothly. Furthermore, using Huaishir's blood as a base material was much better than using anything else. At the very least, it was compatible with the stigmata. Crow's movements didn't stop. He quickly mixed the origin substance solution into the array that he had carved out beforehand. When the vitality in the blood was stimulated by the origin substance, it began to glow with a hazy light. As the saying goes, once an opportunity is lost, it won't come again. Crow took out a pocket watch out of thin air and checked the time on it. In his other hand, he took out the blood-hatred crystal, divine light of grace, evil remains, undying flames, and other materials, and embedded them around the secret apparatus. A faint heat and pain followed the blood on the ground and drilled into Huaishir's body from his wounds that had not yet healed. His body suddenly stiffened. It was as if he had been thrown into an alchemy cauldron in an instant. The mountain ghost stigmata began to operate violently, resisting this sudden change. However, it was futile. Instead, it was guided by the secret apparatus and began to undergo changes that Huaishir could not predict. Intense lignification began again. It spread from his hands and feet to the inside. Layers of fine aerial roots grew out of Huaishir's pores, completely merging him with the entire secret apparatus. Crow's movements were too fast. Huaishir had no time to react. He couldn't help but gasp under the stimulation of intense pain. "I say, can't you prepare me mentally first?" "That's true." Crow nodded. "I had written down the precautions before, but I forgot to give it to you." With that, she stretched out her hand, fished out a thick book, and threw it to Huaishir. But Huaishir did not have the hands to catch it. The cover of the book directly covered Huaishir's face. There was a snap. "What is this?" Huaishir felt the pain. He narrowed his eyes blankly and read the title of the book on the cover. 3 Years of Broken Chapters. 5 years of abuse. Sorry, I took the wrong one." Crow replied without the slightest bit of shame. "That should be it." In a place where Huaishir could not see, she directly pulled out the Sword of Virtue from Huaishir's bag. She raised it and lightly cut her wrist. In an instant, a trace of sparkling blood adhered to the blade. "Please bestow your blessings, clean water, fertile land, and warm wind." Amidst the sound of his skin cracking and shattering, the old man's mottled white hair danced. In the violent wind that rose out of nowhere, he roared, "May the fertile earth descend upon this place. May the Holy Spirit of omnipotence operate in this barren world of men." Thus, the world rumbled. As he raised his hands high, the golden amber glowed with a blazing light. Resplendent blessings soared into the sky, turning into a golden light that could be seen even in the depths of the 9th level of hell. It propped up the sky here, establishing a fertile land that would not last for eternity. The Sand King roared, and his body quickly bent down. However, in the decaying body, a huge miracle emerged again. It turned into a blurry shadow that moved on the throne in the sky. It looked down at the land that was eternally barren and could not help but shed 2 streams of murky tears. His tears fell into the air and turned into rain. Thunder suddenly spread, and then a torrential rain fell out of the sky, covering the entire area around Canberra. The rain of blessings that surged with resplendent golden light covered the sky and the earth. The violent wind rose again, blowing away the dry wind and sand, revealing the pitch-black, fertile land below. The clouds stretched out amidst the thunder, and the lightning seemed to light up the pale sky, returning it to a clear blue. Under the washing of the rain, many stubborn diseases were healed without medicine, and many souls in despair had a glimmer of hope. The old and young faces raised their heads to look at the weary figure on the altar. The Sand King staggered a step and instantly fell down, falling from the altar and into the mud. The people beside him did not have time to support him. They went forward in shock, but the old man pushed them away. He threw himself into the mud again and knelt on the ground. His trembling fingers picked up the mud on the ground, as well as a new sprout that had sprouted from the mud. As if he had found a treasure, he raised his head and showed the hope in his hands to the people around him in ecstasy. The dazed faces froze on the spot. "It's salvation, children!" He laughed loudly, holding up this new glimmer of hope, but he could not help but shed tears of excitement. Our salvation has come. In 2110 AD, the fourth Sand King gave up all of his correction values and used the golden amber to modify the present world. 1/5 of Australia was reborn. An unparalleled achievement was established here. Compared to this magnificent feat that was enough to cause the entire realm to raise its eyebrows, everything else became insignificant. No one noticed. At the same time, someone used the dust of the golden amber as a guide, using this ritual of the same origin as a cover, silently began to advance. It also concealed the terrifying disaster that would erupt because of this. This was the only thing that Crow did not tell others. If one wanted to isolate the enormous influence and gravity of the Book of Destiny, it would be useless no matter how many red strings were wrapped around it. Even if it was only temporary, only when one advanced could the restlessness of the Book of Destiny be completely vented. At that time, the entire world would be affected by this advancement. And if this interference was revealed in the present world, it would undoubtedly be a terrifying disaster. A disaster that was enough to completely defeat Weishur and cause him to fall into complete despair would descend upon the present world, upon everyone's heads. It was the 6th day of the 12th month of the year 2110 for 21 p.m. From this moment on, the terrifying memory that would be known by many as the darkest day officially began amidst countless laments and screams that were about to emerge. In the beginning, no one noticed the arrival of the disaster. Everything operated as usual, and for most people, this day was no different from any other time. After waking up early, finishing his gun practice and his winter vacation homework, Yuan Zhao once again confirmed that his cousin had gone out to attend a fan meeting today and would not be back before nightfall, so no one would disturb him. Then she hurriedly hid in her room, closed the door, and locked the door. He quickly turned on his computer and skillfully sent a notice on Weibo and WeChat. Finally, he activated the live broadcast software. "Hello, friends. In front of the television, I'm your friend, Ultimate Yuan." In the crisp, youthful voice, a cute 2D cat-eared young man's avatar appeared vividly in front of the many live broadcast viewers. Countless bullet screen comments instantly flooded the screen, and some rich people even sent him a rocket to celebrate today's live broadcast. Although it had not been long since the live broadcast, Yuan Zhao quickly became famous with his amazing results in FPS games, occupying a place of his own on the Fighting Cock platform. He even had female fans. He had female fans. He had female fans. Important things should be said 3 times. There were even cute young ladies who sent him messages to invite him to dinner. Yuan Zhao, who had been beaten up by his cousin since he was young, could not afford this. Although he hesitated and did not accept, his enthusiasm for the live broadcast was gradually rising. Then let's not talk nonsense. Let's start today's main topic. Yuan Zhao quickly opened the game software, and in the familiar melodious music, the client of Eternal Brand, Infinite Worlds Showdown was opened. The reason why the popularity was so high today was because Yuan Zhao had announced in advance that he would open a 1,000 card pack in the Eternal Brand's New Year's commemorative pool. It should be noted that with the black-hearted nature of Super Shurji, there was no way he would open a pool where 10 consecutive hits were guaranteed to drop SSR during the new year. In fact, the drop rate of the Flash Gold card was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. This time, the commemorative pool for the new year would last for a week. It was said that the drop rate of the Flash Gold card would increase to around 1%, and there would be various out-of-print cards entering the pool. However, at the same time, the price was ridiculously high. It was more than 10 times more expensive than the physical card packs. 5 cards for a pack would cost 900 East Summer dollars. Although all the card packs that were opened online would quickly send the physical card into the user's hands, there was no need to worry about getting nothing. However, you had to be able to get something good out of it. Otherwise, you would not be able to cry even if you wanted to. Ordinary, poor, Eternal Brand players would feel a chill on their scalp when they saw this kind of card pool and would look at it carefully. It was only at this time that the rich players would make their grand entrance and spend a lot of money to prove how bored and rich they were. And for someone like Yuan Zhao, who was rich and bored, to come open 1,000 card packs, he would naturally attract the attention of the majority of the audience. He opened the app and quickly reloaded. Following the sound of a text message that made Yuan Zhao's heart ache, all the pocket money he had saved for the past 2 years had turned into 1,000 card packs and appeared on the screen. If his cousin knew about this, she would break his legs. Fortunately, he could still sell those gold cards to replenish his health after the opening. Otherwise, he would really have to eat dirt. He forcefully suppressed the pain in his heart and forced a smile. He coughed twice. Then, let's start the next card pack. Suddenly, there was a flood of comments. There were even 2 gay people who were sucking Udi among them. Naturally, they were all muted by Yuan Zhao. Under the live broadcast window, the preset bets were opened. They were betting on how many oranges Yuan Zhao would get. Naturally, there was no one in the column of 100 oranges. Many people wanted to take the risk of getting 50 oranges. Most people carefully chose 30 oranges or 20 oranges. Now, the entire gambling scene was changing rapidly. Many people who were watching the show wanted to gamble and win some official chicken feed. The atmosphere seemed to be very lively. After resting for a while, Yuan Zhao moved the mouse and opened the first pack with high expectations. Let's have a good start. As the young man roared, the blue sky and white clouds rushed to his face. There was a burst of laughter and mockery in the comments. Many people comforted him. The drop rate is so low, it's normal that the first pack doesn't appear. Yuan Zhao didn't care and opened the second pack. It was still blue sky and white clouds. This time, the comments were sparse and everyone was focused on watching. Yuan Zhao still calmly clicked the mouse. The third pack, blue sky and white clouds. The fourth pack, blue sky and white clouds. The fifth pack, blue sky and white clouds. The sixth pack, blue sky and white clouds. The seventh pack, the eighth pack, the ninth pack, until the 100th pack. It was all blue sky and white clouds. There was no flash gold card. And the best result was a Paradise Prince card that was out of print. Why the F***CK? Did Yuan Zhao want this? But he could use it to please his cousin later. Today's a little strange. Yuan Zhao raised his hand and wiped the sweat on his forehead. He began to feel nervous. He moved his wrist and clicked the mouse again. 110 bags, 120 bags, 130 bags. When the 100th pack was opened, the live broadcast room had fallen into a dead silence. Yuan Zhao began to rage. What's with the drop rate of Super Shurji? Did they secretly change it? 200 packs of flash gold oranges can appear. He slammed the keyboard angrily, turned around, and took a bottle of mineral water from the fridge and drank it in one gulp. Then he washed his face and hands formally, burned incense, and prayed. After a long time, he finally calmed down. He returned to the computer and squeezed out a smile. Sorry for the long wait, everyone. Come, let's continue. The comments were full of sympathy. There were also many people who urged the streamer to persevere. Yeah, maybe he's still holding on to his luck. Yuan Zhao waved his hand casually. Have you seen 10 flash gold cards in a pack? Today, I'll let you see. Then, when the 300th pack was opened, there was only a sigh of pity left in the live broadcast room. It's rare to see a streamer like this. To be honest, I'm guessing that the person in front of the screen is a nun. What's with the official routine? Streamer, what have you done to anger the heavens? 300 packs of flash gold still can't appear. Yesterday, there were 4 flash gold cards in the 200 packs next door. Streamer, did you do something wrong? Hurry up and go pray. Don't be afraid. This is just a technical adjustment of the card pool. Don't be afraid. Yuan Zhao forced himself to calm down and gulped. This time, he directly changed the mode and opened 10 packs at a time. 10 packs passed, 20 packs passed. When the 90 packs passed, the live broadcast room was suddenly greeted with a burst of noise. Suddenly, a golden light jumped out from the exploding packs. The rapidly flipping cards brewed a bright golden color, causing countless people to cheer in ecstasy. Flash gold! Flash gold! Flash gold! Oh, the streamer finally appeared. The streamer has dropped flash gold. My youth is over. I knew it. How can it not drop flash gold? Yuan Zhao also breathed a sigh of relief and squeezed out a smile. But before he could laugh out loud, he saw that the golden light on the spinning card quickly faded and turned into a bronze color. Dead silence suddenly fell. In the long silence, Yuan Zhao frantically rubbed his eyes, constantly looking away and back again. He suspected that he was hallucinating. The bullet screen in the live broadcast room had already exploded. Amazing. I've only seen silver turn to gold in my life, but I've never seen gold turn to bronze. F***CK. This is a F***King spectacular sight. Streamer, your life is worth it. I've never seen someone so miserable in all these years. Gold turned to bronze. The F***King gold card turned to bronze. Yuan Zhao almost couldn't hold back his anger. He struggled to look at the table, almost scaring the birds in the trees outside the window. The birds were also looking down blankly at the little idiot in the room. When the card finally flipped over, Yuan Zhao had already fallen into numbness. Battle of the Stars, Judge Fine, I'll be in your hands for the rest of my life. You bastard. He wiped his sorrowful tears, choked, and forced himself to cheer up. I don't F***King believe that I can't drop an orange today. Don't be afraid. It's just a technical adjustment. A technical adjustment. In his anger, he directly used up all his pocket money and bet it all on the live broadcast room's betting table. 450,000. Bet that I'll get at least 10 oranges today. Let's see if you dare to follow. Do you dare to follow? The market changed rapidly. The odds plummeted or rose rapidly, and in an instant, the popularity soared. What was this little bit of pain compared to the torrential rain in Africa? Don't be afraid. At least, I still have dreams. My turn. Draw a card. Yuan Zhao ignored the call from his cousin on his phone. Today, he summoned the courage he had never had in 14 years. He bet his life and began to open packs again. This time, the live broadcast room was silent. All the audience and bullet screen quietly witnessed this brave warrior's card draw. 600 packs, no oranges. 700 packs, no oranges. By the time he reached 800 packs, even the chicken executives were alarmed and put his live broadcast room at the top of the homepage. Young man gambles millions. Can he get an orange today? 900 packs, no oranges. Yuan Zhao's eyes were bloodshot, and his whole body slammed on the table with all his might. He completely ignored the concerned voice of the servant outside the door, moved the mouse, and continued. In the melodious song from the player, Yuan Zhao was not defeated by bad luck. Yuan Zhao stood up, and Yuan Zhao continued to move forward. Yuan Zhao, draw a card. Then blue sky and white clouds, blue sky and white clouds, blue sky and white clouds. When his trembling hand pulled out the last pack, the bullet screen was filled with the whines and cheers of the gamblers. Yuan Zhao could no longer hold back his sobs. Holding on to his last glimmer of hope, Yuan Zhao used all his strength and pressed his finger. Wah! The sound of fate's judgment came from the speaker. silver normal. Mother Faster's cur, why? Yuan Zhao finally couldn't hold back his tears of grief and indignation. He collapsed on the chair and stared at the blue sky and white clouds on the screen. Why can't I get an orange? The sound of his cousin's hurried footsteps finally came from outside the door. It was as if his death was imminent. 2 lines of clear tears fell from the corner of the young man's eyes. He knew that he was going to die today. At the same time, the same despair was constantly descending on everyone's head all over the world, whether it was Cards of All Ages, Silent Crown, or even the famous mobile game, Steel Throne. It wasn't just mobile games and tabletop games, but also popular desktop RPG games on the dark web, as well as every online game, web-based game, and gambling game from Dongsha to the Americas, from Egypt to the Russian Federation, and from Rome to everywhere in the world. On this day, after 420, on this day full of misery and gloominess, the same despair, the same darkness, fell on the head of a stray dog who was hoping for a fluke. Every probability game ushered in the worst consequences. One after another, sunken ships sank into the bottomless card pool. It was as if everyone's money was being swallowed up. There was not a single sound. While every die was equal to a great success, it also increased the probability of a great failure by 1,000 times. More than 10,000 character cards met the fate of being torn apart today. Everyone who tried to upgrade their equipment received the notification of upgrade failed, equipment destroyed, in unprecedented despair. On this day, in these cruel 24 hours from the present world to the border, not a single person, not a single living thing, not a single thing that could move could draw an SSR from the bottomless black card pool. No one. Even if the card pool had a 100% drop rate, it would still be stuck, shut down, and disconnected. Disaster was spreading. Disaster was descending on every player's head. Countless sunken ships screamed in agony and roared in anger. The once insufferably arrogant seals let out their final, sorrowful cry. The darkest day had finally ushered in its climax. Huaishur, on the other hand, was still in a daze. He heard a sound that gradually rang in his ears. I've prepared this plot for so long, and I've finally written it. How delightful! 2 chapters in one, a total of 7,200 words. Since there are double events on the 7th day of the month, please give me your monthly votes. Chapter 477. Since ancient times, who taught the Tao? Inexplicably, a low voice echoed in Huaishur's ears, rousing him from his stupor. Then he discovered that he really was falling deeper and deeper into the darkness. Even though there was no wind blowing in his face, and there was no sense of weightlessness, he still felt this way. He was falling, in the low voice of the chanting. When he listened carefully, he discovered that there was no sound coming from his ears. That sound came from within, from the surging of his soul. Countless origin substances collided with each other, creating a sound that was like a tidal wave, bringing with it a distant and fleeting echo. It reverberated in Huaishur's consciousness, like an electric current flowing through his nerves. It constantly triggered switch after switch, pulling at the floating characters in his memory. Word by word, it pieced together a soundless sound that was gradually rising from the depths of his soul. Even a rock that couldn't think would probably be able to comprehend the meaning behind it, right? That voice, no, Huaishur's soul, was asking this question. At the very beginning of the distant era, who was it that had passed down this scene to future generations? In that instant, the darkness in front of Huaishur's eyes suddenly opened up, as if countless clouds of black fog were rapidly dissipating. It should be said that Huaishur's soul had finally broken through the curtain that had been covering his eyes. In this brief moment, even if it was just a moment, it was indescribably fast. He caught a glimpse of it, under the encirclement of countless bubbles, a magnificent scene formed by countless overlapping arrays, a turbulent flow of nothingness outlined by streaks of light. It was like a grand river, a deep cave, and an indescribably large cornerstone. Inexplicably, Huaishur came to a conclusion in his heart. That was a stone pillar. If one were to use human knowledge and common sense to determine this, then that object of nothingness was without a doubt the stone pillar that had risen from the depths of the distant abyss and propped up the entire world. But the stone pillar dissipated in the blink of an eye like an illusion, no longer visible. Huaishur felt a wave of dizziness, once again falling into a deep sleep that he could not see the end of. When he opened his eyes again, he heard the whisper that came from the depths of his soul after a long time of brewing. Up and down are not formed. Why do you test it? How did all this come to be before heaven and earth were formed? Then Huaishur saw hell. In this abyss formed by endless depths, there were countless layers of broken walls and dilapidated walls in the eternal darkness. It was a tragic scene. It was only now that Huaishur could confirm that he was indeed falling. It fell from the realm of reality like a speck of dust. Then it slowly passed through the layers of borders and finally fell into hell. He headed deeper into the depths of hell. Just like that, he floated in the darkness like a feather. He gazed at the bustling scene as it disappeared into the deserts, oases, and isolated islands at the border. The steel city under the thick smoke, the giant elephant that carried the entire settlement on its back as it walked on the wasteland, the deserted town that was connected by countless lone towers above the sea of clouds, the busy and noisy mines in the vacuum, and even the small villages that were as beautiful and exquisite as works of art. Those lonely, noisy, beautiful, or decadent worlds were also rapidly fading away. Finally, he embraced the abyss. In the darkness, there were only countless illusionary scenes that appeared and disappeared. He caught a glimpse of the outlines of hell, but when Huaishur wanted to take a closer look, they were once again hidden in the darkness. Huaishur could only determine his position and depth through the lighthouses that the Astronomical Association had placed between different depths. Those flashing lights were the only things that could determine his position and depth. Just like that, he passed through the edge of Zarathustra's great secret apparatus and entered the shallow zone of hell. His speed became faster and faster. Soon, he passed by the abyssal mirror that extended from the border of White City. He then passed through the massive walls that were deliberately piled up by the ruins of hell and entered the deepest zone that was closest to the realm of reality. Here, countless large groups of abyssals occupied each other's territories, fighting and killing each other. They were either allies or enemies. He could vaguely see the soul light of the ascendants floating in it, but it was difficult to see the details. Only the tens of thousands of chaotic zones that resembled battlefields flashed past Huaishur's eyes. Then he fell into the withering zone, unable to turn back. As if he had sunk into the deep sea, in the faint light, Huaishur saw huge and terrifying shadows colliding with each other. He also saw countless corrosives lurking in the corners of the abyss like weeds, and even the predators that roamed their own territories. The dynasties of the rulers were built here. Like a black hole in the abyss, they expanded their own gravity in all directions, displaying their unique supreme crown. Some were cruel, some were bloody, some were strange. Leviathan stretched itself out here, stirring the thousands of tentacles of the endless sea. Eve-lit sprinkled the brutal and cruel light. The king of Wither sat on his throne in his deathly territory. The dragon of decay entrenched itself in the kingdom of corpses. The purgatory factory owners gathered here to form the largest nightmare workshop in hell. The titans of the sea fought in the shadows. The jesters of the abyss and the scholars of darkness hid themselves in the darkness. All kinds of scenes came before him and quickly disappeared. As if someone had noticed the arrival of a passerby, a pair of cold eyes looked up and fell on Huaishur, who was gradually getting further away. They reached out to grab him, but it was too late, so they looked away indifferently. Huaishir had fallen into the dark abyss. In the absolute darkness, Huaishir felt that he had brushed past countless behemoths. But when he looked around carefully, he could not see anything. It was as if there was only a void here, but there seemed to be countless predators hiding behind the scenes. It was silent. In the dead silence, a bolt of lightning suddenly lit up from afar. Then, countless cruel silhouettes were illuminated. In an instant, the prey in the center was torn apart and quickly returned to silence. There were no more signs. A blank voice sounded behind. Huaishir, there's actually someone here? But when Huaishir turned around, he only had time to see the outline of a traveler covered in dust. Then he quickly became dizzy and felt that he was falling faster. Deeper and deeper. But was there any deeper? Did the legendary silent abyss really exist? Huaishir did not know, nor did he know how long he had been falling. The falling trend gradually stopped. He stopped in a seemingly eternal desolation and looked around. When he looked up, he seemed to be able to glimpse the light of the present realm from a distance. He had no idea where this place was, or rather, it was hard to tell whether what he saw along the way was reality or illusion. At this moment, whether he was in hell or sleeping in a dream, he could not tell. But in the decadent ruins, when he took 2 steps, he saw the ruins of a collapsed building and even a broken sign. It was full of cracks and rust. The sign of the Astronomical Society was indeed covered in dust. Huaishir reached out and touched it, and it was broken just like that. Until now, when he looked around the ruins, he could vaguely distinguish the former appearance of Jinling. But was this real or fake? In shock, Huaishir staggered back a step, and a broken notebook fell from the ashes of the skeleton. The withered pieces of paper flew out like leaves, and then quickly dissipated in the air. Only 2 pieces of wreckage fell to the ground, and one could still vaguely make out that the last words left behind in the fading ink. Looking back on the past, it is full of shameful past. On the fragments that quickly turned into dust, only the last words were left, almost like repentance. I was born as a human. I am very sorry. But these words of farewell were crudely scratched out several times with a pen and erased. In the end, a huge comment was added between the lines. Concise and comprehensive. Only 2 words. Bullshit. A gust of wind blew through the air, sweeping away the dust and everything in front of him. The huge ruins quickly disappeared into thin air and turned into nothingness. In the darkness, only a distant shadow quietly stared at him. But in a hurry, he didn't know how to respond, so he just instinctively held her hand. Then he realized that he was completely different from before. Yes, young Master Ming, Huaishir smiled. I'm back. Chapter 478. Advancement get. Coffin repair get. Feng Shu's independent get. The 3 goals were suddenly completed, but Huaishir didn't feel the slightest bit of reality. He could only confirm it repeatedly, seeing that Feng Shu could finally walk out of the Stone Essence Hall and no longer be bound here. Huaishir finally breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't feel the ecstasy he expected. Instead, he felt peace and joy from the bottom of his heart. It was a success. Then, it was time for the main event. After being dragged back to the basement by Crow, he began to test young Master Ming's various abilities. The first was strength and speed. These 2 points didn't need to be mentioned at all. With so many high-grade materials as a foundation, if Huaishir still couldn't reach the standard after his advancement, he should just cut his own neck and apologize. First was the strength test. The average level here referred to the average level of the combat abilities stigmata, except for a few strange stigmata that strengthened their strength to the limit. Huaisher wouldn't be inferior to any level 3 sublimator. If he added the drummer's buff and drummer use footwork, Huaisher could simply arm wrestle with the previous air lie. Well, although it would be troublesome if he used too much strength and broke his wrist. But before that, it was enough for air lie to suffer. The next test was endurance. It was terrifying. Without taking into account other skills, after continuously punching with all his strength for half an hour and smashing the steel plate in front of him into a pulp, Huaisher didn't feel the slightest bit tired except for a little pain in his hand. If it was the original, he would have been exhausted. That's normal. Originally, Hilghost's recovery speed was frighteningly high. Now that you've advanced, if you don't consider the limits of your bones and muscles, you can maintain a highly efficient output for 24 hours. Crow rolled a pen on his wings and tapped on the notebook. However, being able to break even is already very scary. Next, Huaisher was best at speed. Limited by the scope of the room, it was impossible to test long-distance running. However, it was more based on endurance, so there was no need to spend time testing it. Today's test was more inclined towards Huaisher's improvement in explosive power and short-distance sprinting. When Huaisher easily completed 6 leaps between the ceiling and the wall and appeared at the other end of the basement like a ghost, he couldn't help but feel a burst of comfort from the bottom of his heart. I'm done. He was certain that he was now above Van Helsing, who was once at the peak of rank 3. He could do all the techniques that Van Helsing could do in the past, and even more easily. As for the attack speed, after repeated attempts and adjustments by Huaisher, he was now able to adjust the virtual metronome in his mind to a terrifying 416 beats per minute. Twice as fast as a conventional metronome. Under ideal conditions, Huaisher, who was fully focused, could launch 6 attacks in 1 second, and that was more than enough. With the increase in his muscle strength and speed, the chord technique that he had learned from Elder Lua was naturally integrated. Now, the time he needed to accumulate power had been shortened to the limit. 3-degree chords were at his fingertips. As long as he prepared in advance for 1 second, he could easily perform a 9-chord chord that overlapped 5 notes at the same time. Huaisher could still work harder, but what limited him was not his ability, but the number of weapons. The original Sword of Virtue had also been integrated into the stigmata as a material during the advancement, like the sacrificial knife. He didn't need to carry it with him anymore. He could pull it out from his soul with just a thought. Other than the Rope of Sorrow that wasn't good at direct attacks, there were the Axe of Wrath, the Sacrificial Knife, the Spear of Compassion, the Hammer of Pain, and the Sword of Virtue. These were the equipment that Huaisher was most comfortable with. As for the other border relics, even if he could barely use them, they didn't have such a sense of harmony. There was no doubt that even if it was only an improvement in the basic physical fitness, it was a qualitative change. And as a support-type stigmata, after young Master Ming's advancement, the original Mountain Ghost's talent had also been strengthened. It had advanced to life diversion, and its ability to survive had been further improved. As for the Ean's soul, which was one with the Mountain Ghost, its ability had also been improved death absorption. Back when she was still a ghost, Huaisher had been able to extract ash from a person's fear and despair before they died. Now, her ability had improved to the point where she was able to extract origin substance from the ash in reverse. Even if Huaisher's technique was still too rusty and this conversion efficiency was less than 1/10, it was still enough to shock people. Isn't this like killing people to recover mana? Huaisher was stunned. This skill didn't seem like it came from a righteous sect at all. Why was his style becoming more and more like a villain? No, it seemed like he had been walking the path of a villain from the very beginning. Less than 1/10 of the conversion efficiency can only be said to be better than nothing. Perhaps it can be supplemented when necessary, but if you really want to rely on this to survive, you might as well become an evil soul. Extract ashes from the soul, and then extract origin substance from the ashes. After these two conversions, how much can you refine? The crow didn't seem to care at all. The Northern European evil souls can suck people out as soon as they catch them. Every breath counts, and the efficiency is more than 98%. Compared to them, you're just a little brother. In the end, it's just a bonus to the young master of life. Don't worry about that. Let's get to the main point, okay? Release your stigmata. When Huaishur heard this, he took a deep breath and finally activated the sacred mark in his body. It seemed to instantly turn into mist and spread out. Immediately after, the mist condensed back into a human figure. After a moment of floating, Huaishur's silhouette appeared again, standing in the middle of the basement. He looked at his hands. Under the thin t-shirt in front of his chest, the tear that had disappeared after the advancement had reappeared. Streaks of pure white lines extended out like tattoos, overlapping with each other, wrapping around the limbs, covering the fingertips, and even extending to the collar, outlining an indescribable emblem and coat of arms on the neck. Incredible! It was as if he had lost weight. Huaishur earnestly took a few steps forward. He felt lighter than he had ever felt before, but it wasn't to the point where he couldn't control his body. It was as if, with just a thought, he could bang. Huaishur's vision went dark. He slammed into the wall that was originally 10 steps away and fell backwards. It happened too quickly. He didn't even have time to react. As if he had expected this, the crow laughed gloatingly. He lowered his head and looked at Su Chun. After the young master of life's sacred mark is activated, your body will become the purest conductor of origin substances. You won't lose any of your origin substances, and your origin substances can directly interfere with your body to a certain extent. It really is quite easy to think about. However, it's best if you don't think about things that are not suitable for children when you activate it. Otherwise, you'll make a fool of yourself, just like those evil immortals in the legends. I can teach you Midas touch, but when you use it, you definitely can't think about that big rock at the entrance of the village. Once this thought is planted in your mind, there is no way to stop it. Huaishur's face instantly turned green. He tried his best to control himself, but his efforts were futile. Images that were not allowed to appear in the Book of Destiny kept appearing in his mind. All he wanted to do was press this stupid crow to the ground and give it a good beating. Finally, the crow had seen enough of a joke. He raised his wings and pointed in the direction of Huaishur's original position. "Look over there." Huaishur raised his head and looked over. Then he saw himself. No, it should be said that it was his former self. Just like when you waved your hand under a light, you would see your fingers leave behind afterimages. Huaishur was actually able to see the faint outline of himself that he had left behind in his original position. These outlines had followed Huaishur's advance and were evenly spread out along the path that he had left behind. They didn't disappear for a long time, as if they had already been engraved into the air. And when Huaishur got up, he was able to see the faint outline of his body on the ground. Every time he took a step, he would leave behind a faint shadow. It was like a picture taken by a high-speed camera. What is this? This is the qualitative change in the path of Heaven's Inquisition after reaching the 3rd level. It is also young arbiter of life's most important innate skill, shadow burial. That's it. Huaishur was in disbelief. He didn't understand why the crow was so serious about this, and he didn't know what the use of an innate skill that left behind afterimages was. But just as he was in a daze, he discovered, to his surprise, that the afterimages that he had left behind in his original position had begun to move on their own accord. As soon as Huaishur relaxed his control, they began to wander around the room. Some were running around, Some were lying on the ground, some were standing upside down, and some were even scratching their feet. Very quickly, as the origin substance was cut off, the afterimages quickly dissipated. They were like bubbles that had been popped. Do you know why the path of Heaven's Inquisition is the most effortless and difficult to control path in the celestial genealogy? It is simply too difficult to smoothly unleash this power. There are simply too many things that are required. The crow tilted his head and glanced at him. "Why don't you look at your right hand?" Huaishur lowered his head suspiciously and looked at his right hand. Only then did he discover that the Nibelungen ring had disappeared. At the base of his index finger, a faint golden rune that looked like a tattoo had actually merged with the sacred insignia. It was as if the sacred insignia had been attached to his body, without any gaps. And inside, the space, which had already reached its limit, began to expand once again. In the past, 3 ghosts would have been enough to fill up the ranks, but now, with Huaishur's improvement, the number of ghosts had increased by several times. And in the middle, a new layer of origin substance had appeared, slowly brewing and absorbing the young arbiter of fate's origin substance to replenish the army. Huaishur felt that he could use death absorption to replenish the negative origin substance at any time. After Huaishur had become a 3rd-grade young arbiter of fate, the upper limit of the space had increased by a frightening amount. Originally, when Huaishur was a mountain ghost, he could only create 3 ghosts. Now, however, those 3 ghosts had simultaneously advanced along with Huaishur, becoming mountain ghosts. And under each mountain ghost, 3 new openings had appeared. How come it was like a pyramid scheme, where it could be developed offline? Chapter 479. Just as Huaishur was sighing, his heart suddenly moved. After he took a few steps forward, the afterimage behind him started to move on its own. Following Huaishur's will, a face in his afterimage suddenly changed, forming the face of the red glove. The red glove of the mountain ghost, holding the sacrificial knife. Following Huaishur's thoughts, he kept flashing and disappearing in the afterimage. The army in the Nibelungen ring and young Master Ming's talent actually combined together, appearing and disappearing according to Huaishur's thoughts. When Huaishur focused on controlling it, he could even stand still, and dozens of afterimages would walk out of his body on their own. Unfortunately, as soon as Huaishur relaxed a little, they would go their own way, not listening to his control at all, like a husky out of control. He really didn't understand what was going on. The limit is 61, very good, more than 4 times the normal limit. Crow nodded with satisfaction. Next, when you can perfectly control your own afterimages, young Master Ming's talent will be considered to be under your control. At that time, not only will you be able to move and flash between your own afterimages within 200 meters. As for how to use it, I don't need to remind you, right? Of course not. Perfect transmission and flash, even if he just knew about this change. Huaishur could already think of dozens of ways to use it. This was simply a different kind of speed bonus, and he could even easily cross obstacles and dodge. If he wanted to escape, he could split into dozens of afterimages and escape in all directions. If he mixed in with them, who could stop him? Other than that, it's the most important thing. After Crow finished counting, she put down the notebook and pen in her hand. 4 kinds of insights and 4 kinds of advancement materials. Can you feel where they are? With her reminder, Huaishur closed his eyes and carefully searched in his body, but found that even the mirror of nothingness in the past had disappeared. Originally, that kind of thing was between existence and nothingness, just an outline, but now the outline had disappeared. It had all merged into young Master Ming's sacred mark, and together with the advancement materials, it faintly formed a core. Huaishur opened his eyes and stretched out his hand. After a deep sound, his soul ability actually activated on its own. A perfectly straight steel pole condensed out, following that countless mist intertwined with each other, turning into a flag that hung down from the pole. A flag made of bone and pitch black. Huaishur waved his hand, and the banner fell to the ground. In an instant, rolling darkness swept out in all directions. Pure darkness and silence swallowed up everything within a 50-meter radius. Normal vision, spiritual perception, thermal perception, infrared, and even higher-level origin substances couldn't see anything clearly. Unless one used insight, which was above Huaishur's level, to forcefully observe, it would be difficult to see the vague outline of anything. While holding the banner with one hand, the sword of virtue appeared in Huaishur's right hand. Kong Gai Shi Chui Yao, ascending to the ninth heaven to caress the comet. The crow's voice came from the darkness, wielding the sword to support the young Sun Wukong to serve the people. This is young Master Ming's true peak state. Congratulations. Huaishur, you now have the qualifications to call yourself the inheritor of Heaven's Inquisition. The boundless darkness was like a shelter for Huaishur. He didn't feel any discomfort. Instead, it was like he had returned home. The darkness didn't obstruct Huaishur's vision. In fact, it even seemed to extend his perception, making everything clearer. Huaishur could sense a vague vortex circling around him, from which the crow's voice could be heard. What made him even happier was that after the banner appeared, the effects of the halo of fear and halo of plague, which he thought had disappeared, reappeared. Blood, hatred, crystal, divine light of grace, evil creatures remains, and undying flames. Among the four precious advancement materials, the divine light of grace had fused with Huaishur's body, increasing his already frighteningly exuberant vitality. The undying flames appeared on the banner, occupying the main axis and burning vigorously. It didn't bring any light, instead devouring all light and plunging everything into absolute darkness. The power of the evil creatures remains and blood, hatred, crystal were both operating here, supporting the foundation of this darkness, turning it into a fortress that hid Huaishur's tracks. "What is this?" he asked in confusion. Its foundation is the original Een Soul's dark cloak. The crow's voice came from the vortex. Thanks to the nourishment of a large amount of blood, hatred, crystal, the decaying dreams remains caused it to undergo a second transformation, forming your most important ability, Bone Burial Sanctuary. That doesn't sound like a good place. To put it simply, it's a kind of church and sanctuary. The crow said casually, the current you is already the young arbiter of life. Even if divinity is insignificant, having it and not having it are two different things. Wherever you are, that is your territory, and your sanctuary. Sanctuary? You call this a sanctuary? Huaishur looked around at the darkness. Why is my sanctuary like a graveyard? As a place of worship, whether it's a church, temple, or monastery, isn't it normal to have a graveyard nearby? The crow calmly flapped his wings. It's just that your graveyard is particularly large. Don't mind it. Who told you to bury an important person in your graveyard, right? Yes, that's right. The decaying Dream Queen's remains. From a certain point of view, a part of the decaying Dream Queen was indeed buried in this darkness. It was because of this that the young arbiter of life's stigmata had changed, giving birth to such a strange and eerie ability. I've said it many times, the road of Heaven's Inquisition is a supportive stigmata. Supportive? If you like to be stubborn or reckless, that's your business, but for most people, it's very difficult to have the ability to fight head-on. The young arbiter of life's sanctuary is the only ability they can rely on to protect themselves. The crow said solemnly, if they don't rely on the existence of other tools, whether it's the mountain ghost or the young arbiter of life, their abilities will be limited. It's because of this that they use the ring of Nibelungen to raise an army to make up for their shortcomings. The existence of the sanctuary is to create an advantageous location for the army's battle, and your original Black Fog and Plague are all supports born for this purpose. You're a support. Huaishir was stunned by the words of the crow. He was so good at fighting. How did he suddenly become a support? Moreover, he had always had the heart to attack. How did he suddenly become a healer? You mean, I'm a summoner? It's very difficult for me to meet a weirdo like you, whose sublimator can fight more than an army. The crow sighed. Forget it. Who doesn't have one or two variables? Before the young arbiter of life, whether it was the Een Soul or the mountain ghost, they were all biased towards survival and escape. Whether it was the Een Soul's dark windbreaker or the mountain ghost's life force absorption, they were all specialized in the survival ability of the sublimator to the greatest extent so that they would not die particularly miserably. Before Grade 4, the sublimators of the Road of Heaven's Inquisition only had one signature skill, which was their own sanctuary. After having a sanctuary, they would be able to usher in a qualitative change, and they would no longer have to be afraid. Under the protection of an army, they would also have a guarantee of their own safety. This was the strength of the Road of Heaven's Inquisition. In the celestial genealogy, it was one of the most suitable roads to nurture an army, second only to the Road of Dusk, but also completely different. The frost giant army of the Road of Dusk was the vanguard and stand-ins that he had painstakingly created, and there would be one less to use. The Een Soul army of the Road of Heaven's Inquisition was the other extreme. It could be said to be of good quality and cheap. This was especially true after receiving the protection of the sanctuary. In the Road of Heaven's Inquisition, all the sanctuaries had a basic ability. They could suppress the dark attribute stigmata inside and strengthen all the Een Souls and mountain ghosts within the domain. And as a high-ranking Shinua user who spent money and lives, Huaishir's burial sanctuary had even more astonishing effects. After being bestowed with the characteristic of decaying dream, all the army members inside could control illusions to a certain extent and affect the enemy's mind. At the same time, they were immune to the weakness of being unable to resist origin substance attacks. As long as there was a thread left, they could quickly absorb Huaishir's origin substance to recover. Huaishir's halo of fear and halo of plague were all distributed to them. It could be said that from now on, Huaishir had a bunch of smurfs. And what's even more terrifying is, cough cough. Crow's expression suddenly became somewhat awkward. Due to certain reasons, yes, the Book of Destiny has some interference with your advancement. When the time comes, everyone who enters the sanctuary will be especially unlucky. Especially unlucky? Huaishir did not understand. What do you mean by unlucky? No, it should be extremely, extremely, extremely unlucky. Crow clicked her tongue and sighed. So unlucky that even if you sell your house and go bankrupt, you still won't be able to get an SSR. Hiss. Huaishir sucked in a breath of cold air. So terrifying. This kid definitely can't. Wait a minute, this seems to be me? Immediately after, he thought of an even more terrible problem. In the range of these unlucky people you mentioned, Huaishir looked into her eyes and asked word by word, "Does it include me?" "Ahaha, of course not." Crow looked left and right, then laughed out loud with a guilty look on his face. "What are you thinking about?" Ahahaha. She was not wrong. Huaishir's current luck was no longer completely African, but had returned to the average level. However, as the culprit who caused the entire world to sink, if people found out about this, wouldn't they skin him alive? More than 90 video game companies in the world had been sued by players, and their stock prices had plummeted because of the false drop rate. According to the Astronomical Society's investigation, Sand King was the one who took the blame because Huaishir was hiding behind the golden amber. Yes, it must be the correction of the reality that caused these harmless problems to occur. Sand King, was in high spirits. He casually took out his assets and plucked a strand of hair. The Australian mining group will pay for this fine. Otherwise, Huaisher would have gone bankrupt by now. Moreover, he would have to work for the Astronomical Society for 10 lifetimes and not eat or drink to pay it off. Finally, what I want to tell you is the thing you need to pay attention to the most. Crow became serious, which was rare for her. It's about young Master Ming's destiny. After today's 2 chapters, I realized that there are still many people who don't know that there are double monthly votes for the first 7 days of this month. Everyone, don't hesitate anymore. Please support me. Monthly votes. Chapter 480. On the Heavens Inquisition Road. The third stage is the eruption of all the previous accumulation and brewing. It can be said that the Heavens Inquisition Road has only taken shape now. Although it is indeed a qualitative change. For you, this is just the beginning. In the afternoon in the living room, Huaisher was basking in the sun, staring at the crow in front of the small blackboard. Behind her, a piece of chalk floated in the air, quickly writing down Huaisher's next main goals. There were 3 in total. The first was the most urgent, to control the talent. Disasters and miracles were 2 sides of the same coin, especially the sacred mark, which was an existence extracted from the abyss. Huaisher had to learn to control his talent, shadow burial, and control all the afterimages. Only then could he be considered to have truly advanced to young master of life. Otherwise, if he left it alone or even became lazy, sooner or later the sacred mark would lose control and split apart, dying a horrible death. In this regard, Huaisher had shot himself in the foot. The more afterimages shadow burial had, the more difficult it was to control them. An ordinary young master of life might need a week or 2 to complete the task, but for Huaisher, who had more than 4 times the number, it would take at least 3 to 4 months. But Huaisher didn't care. He even felt that it was quite good. Although these 3 to 4 months were his weakest period, this was the realm after all, and he was the eagle claw of the Astronomy Society, a lackey. Who would be so bored as to kill an inspector, looking for death? Moreover, it was only 3 to 4 months, and he might be able to speed it up after a while. At least the control brought by the birth of life was no joke. He would just take it as a vacation. Then, the second thing was to fuse the soul. After completely controlling the young master of life's sacred mark, it was time to prepare for the advancement to the 4th stage. And the prerequisite for the 4th stage was the complete fusion of the soul and the sacred mark. It should be said that it was the complete fusion of the ascendant and the sacred mark. From then on, there would be no distinction between them, and they would become the miracle of the abyss in human form. This process was why the 3rd stage was called ether. It was named after the miraculous substance in the legends. At this stage, the sublimator would gradually possess powers beyond common sense under the deep integration of the stigmata. For example, they could walk on water purely by instinct, fly freely without wings, emit rays with their naked eyes, turn their bones into metal, and even grow scales on their internal organs. Before that, the enhancement of the divine mark to the human body must be limited to the human body's ecological system and internal circulation. It could not be carried out boldly and decisively. Otherwise, it might lead to a sudden death. However, as they entered the 3rd stage, the deep integration began. Humans would gradually evolve from weak human bodies to legendary creatures. It could be seen as the arrival of the second puberty. He began to try to break through the blockade of Zarathustra's secret apparatus and form his own cycle. Although there were still limitations, he had taken a crucial step. In this process, the soul and the divine mark would be deeply integrated and transformed. The combination of the two would lay the foundation for the 4th level. during this period, there were countless cases of the soul and the divine mark collapsing into an eroded species due to the huge difference in type. It should be noted that most wild sublimators could only rely on luck to choose the divine mark. Even if there was no conflict under the suppression of the divine mark, the soul's ability would not be able to grow. It would gradually become dispensable with the improvement of one's strength, or there was no way to improve at all. At this point, there was no chance for him to start all over again. The white wolf hook, the authoritative relic of the master of the lineage, was not something that anyone could get. One wrong step would lead to many wrong steps. If the direction was wrong at the beginning, then one would be stuck at the third stage for the rest of one's life. Or stubbornly stubborn, take a chance and either go home for dinner or the whole village for dinner. Although most of the time it was the latter. Huaishir did not have to worry about this at all. This was the advantage of the support type. As long as the basic type and attributes did not conflict too much, there was no need to worry about a tragic ending of sudden death on the spot. Moreover, thanks to Crow's foresight and guidance at the beginning, there was no conflict between young Master Ming's divine mark and Huaishir's confining hand. They were extremely compatible. On the other hand, young Arbiter of Life represented the growth of a child. When this miracle overlapped with the sealing hand, it directly became a buff that accelerated the child's growth, and there was no possibility of premature death. After completely fusing with the divine mark, the confining hand would usher in another transformation. It was just that no one knew what kind of changes would occur at that time. Therefore, it was the least of the problems. The only problem was that the second condition was completely based on the third condition, that everything went smoothly. Young Master Ming's growth. In other words, it had to comply with its own destiny so that this miracle could move towards perfection. This was the biggest problem Huaishir had to face after mastering the young Master Ming's divine mark. The essence of young Master Ming's miracle lies in the growth of a child. Crow said calmly, "Do you have any idea how to do it specifically? Raise a child?" Huaishir pinched his chin. "Should I sponsor an orphanage? Or go to a preschool school and become a kindergarten teacher?" Indeed, many young Master Ming did this. Previously, there was a special Dawn Children's Foundation in the Utopia. As long as you went to work, your correction value would rise. Later, after the Utopia fell, this foundation probably went bankrupt. Crow shook his head. Although this is convenient, it's actually not the most cost-effective choice. In fact, there should be a faster and more rapid path for young Master Ming's growth, and it's also the most demanding and rewarding choice. Huaishir subconsciously became cautious. "Don't tell me you want me to give birth to children myself? Give birth to 100 children, and all of them become Saint Seiyas? Ah, you really know how to joke." Crow laughed and immediately became serious. "But this is also a way. It suits you quite well. Why don't we consider it?" "Don't. I'm just talking nonsense." "I won't interrupt. You continue." Huaishir immediately shut up. "Okay, then let's talk about the fastest and most difficult way." Crow sighed. "Although it's true that young Master Ming is a miracle, don't forget that this miracle itself comes from the abyss and carries the attribute of disaster. If you want to grow, you must go to hell to seek it. Have you never thought that the growth of a child, in addition to describing an individual, can also be used to describe a group?" Huaishir was stunned. He thought of something and found it hard to believe. "No way. That's right. Crow nodded. "The most orthodox, fastest, and simplest way for young Master Ming to grow is to choose a group of abyssal groups that are compatible with your attributes, and then personally cultivate them into a large group of orthodox abyssal groups. When they finish growing, your young Arbiter of Life will also finish growing. Not only that, you will also have a proper army under your command, and you will also become the leader of their army. Why wouldn't you do something like killing 3 birds with 1 stone? It was indeed a good thing, except that it was extremely difficult and very easy to die. Also, raising an abyssal group. Huaishir immediately reacted. Isn't this stealing food from the ranch owner's bowl? Stealing food is not wrong, but if you don't eat it, then it's over. Crow retorted, they're all your cannon fodder. Who will be your tool after eating them? No, a large group of tools. Huaishir fell silent and hesitated. Can we not choose this? Of course. Crow looked at him in surprise. Then let's just choose something else. Do you think your elder sister will force you to choose this one? Of course I would. Hearing her say this, Huaishir's heart suddenly sank. Okay, this path is stable. Until now, how could he not know that this black-hearted woman was very bad? Every time she put a choice in front of him, but in the end, she always arranged it clearly. And every time, it seemed to be Huaishir's choice. Okay, didn't I ask for your opinion in advance this time? Crow landed on his head and bounced. I'm a bird, so I'm very democratic. At least I have to get your approval. Huaishir couldn't help but roll his eyes. If I don't agree, will I become a dictator? Even if you don't agree, we still have a way to do it. But didn't you seem to be quite interested? Crow lowered her head, as if hanging upside down in front of Huaishir's eyes. She looked into his eyes. Are you the kind of person who says you don't want it, but is very honest in your heart? It feels so perverted. Huaishir didn't want to pay attention to her at all. Okay, let's stop joking around and get back to the topic. Crow's voice became serious. This way, besides being the fastest and the most rewarding, has the greatest benefit. She said, this is the only way to allow you to transform yourself into a great seeming before you reach the 4th level. What? Huaishir was stunned, completely stunned. Becoming a great seeming before the 4th level? Is that even possible? Big sister, you must be joking. Even if it's just 1 word, how can these two be the same? 3rd level, 4th level, aren't they all man-made? Crow calmly retorted. Otherwise, according to common sense, the young arbiter of life should be at the 4th stage, right? In the end, the young seeming and the great seeming are 2 sides of the same coin. No, it should be said that in order to take care of the ascender, a huge miracle was forcefully split into 2 parts. Therefore, there is a possibility of merging them again. Otherwise, it would be impossible to steal the chicken before the 4th level. If it succeeds, then you will be able to evolve into the Cloud Lord as a great seeming. Crow paused and said seriously, at that time, your corresponding 5th level will no longer be the East Lord, but the Tai that only existed in the imagination. Tai? Huaishir's eyes lit up. Is it the Ingzhou person who can summon the battle Tyrannosaurus? Crow sighed helplessly. You're still joking at a time like this? Aren't you joking too? Huaishir slammed the table, but Crow didn't say anything. She just looked at him silently with a calm expression. Huaishir couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't believe it. Really? Yes. Crow nodded. Huaishir was so scared that he wet his pants. Chapter 481. Tai. Even in the legends, the divine title also included the scope of the sun, and some people believed that the two were actually the same. But in fact, the difference between Dongjun and Tai was like the difference between a cabinet minister and an emperor. Even if one looked glorious, in fact, he was just a high-level employee. The other was the true ruler of all things. As the supreme god of the Dongxia region, he was one of the few powerful gods in the world. Even after observation and deduction, many scholars once believed that this god had never existed at all, and that it was just a fabrication for the sun god Dongjun. Otherwise, How could there not be a little bit of divinity left to this day? Unfortunately, the fall and disappearance of the gods was an unsolved case, not to mention Tai, who had disappeared thousands of years ago. No one could prove whether his existence was real or not. But now, Crow threw out such a big piece of news in front of Weisher without any warning, and Weisher's brain almost stopped working on the spot. Tai really exists? Yes, Crow replied calmly. It did exist, even if it only existed for a moment. But this miracle undoubtedly once circulated in the world. Weisher swallowed dryly, and he was already a little eager to try. But before that, at least there were some questions that needed to be clarified. What is the success rate? Don't worry about that. Crow said, if you can succeed, then it will be 100%. Weisher was speechless. So I'm just a little white mouse to explore the way. I'm afraid there's a sudden death waiting for me. Didn't I say that the celestial genealogy completed a total of 7.5 paths of sublimation? Crow looked at him innocently. This is the other half. In fact, the path of Heaven's Inquisition was a semi-finished product that the Utopia had not been able to complete until the fall of the Utopia. Although it could be proven that this path of sublimation ultimately led to the sun god, Dongjun, after real verification, it was discovered that Dongjun was still not the theoretical limit. It should be able to go further. But after that, no matter what method he used, he couldn't improve on this foundation. In countless simulation experiments, no matter what method was used, Dongjun's stigmata would directly collapse and turn into an artificial sun. Perhaps there was a premise that had been overlooked, or perhaps there was a flaw that had not been noticed. This was the difficulty that Kingdom of Heaven had not been able to overcome until the fall of Kingdom of Heaven. Until the split of Utopia, no one had been able to become East Lord, let alone try to become Tai. Don't worry. Since I've said so, I'm 100% sure of success. Crow comforted him. Besides, don't the stigmata grow on your body? Isn't it up to you whether you're willing or not? As she spoke, she raised her wing and patted Weisher's shoulder, making a sincere and magnanimous promise. Even if you don't want to enter Tai, I won't force you. Really? Weisher was doubtful. Of course it's true, Crow replied habitually. Why would I lie to you? Weisher. Crow. In the silence, Weisher stared straight at Crow. Crow also blinked innocently at him, her eyes full of sincerity and kindness. She looked very credible, but Weisher couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. He felt that her arrangement was already on the way. I have a question. Weisher suddenly said. Well, ask away. Crow said, I want to hear the truth. I need you to make a promise to your words. As he spoke, Weisher's expression was unprecedentedly serious. He stared straight at the black-hearted woman in front of him. Are you Tai? No. Crow shook her head and asked in confusion, What are you thinking about? There are only 3 gods in the present realm, excluding the White Crown King, whose fate is unknown. There is only one in the American lineage, and one in the Continuation Academy. Do you think that if a god is still alive, the Astronomy Association wouldn't know? She paused for a moment and immediately became happy. Oh, in your heart, is my image so glorious and great? It really makes me a little happy. Weisher was speechless. She was right. There were only 3 gods left in the world. The White Crown King, who was uncertain whether he was still alive, the existence of an extremely confidential existence in the Continuation Academy, and the backer of the American lineage, who was barely holding up the overall situation. Other than these 3, there couldn't be any other gods left in the world. Moreover, if I were a goddess, Crow asked seriously, wouldn't you be a bootlicker? Weisher rolled his eyes again. What was wrong with him to think that such an unreliable black-hearted woman was a god? If she were a god, the world would have fallen into hell long ago, wouldn't it? But even if he knew in his heart that this was just his imagination, he still couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but start to consider her suggestion. Whether it was Dongjun or Tai, they were too far away for him. Now, Huaishir's top priority was to master the young master of life's stigmata. Otherwise, what was the point of thinking about the name of the child in the future when he hadn't even touched his partner's little hand? What he was considering was whether to use the method provided by Crow. He was a little tempted, just like how Crow knew what he would choose from the beginning. He also knew that he couldn't resist the temptation of this method. Cultivate a large group of hell that belonged to him. It was indeed killing 3 birds with 1 stone. He could take the long view and think about it carefully. But the problem is, Huaishir had a headache. If I do this, won't it cause distortion in the present realm? As the Red Stick Fighter of the Command Bureau, it was one thing to say that he was secretly a traitor of the Utopia, but he also had to secretly communicate with Hell and raise a group of demons and ghosts as henchmen. This was no longer at the level of knowingly breaking the law. No one knew that the Book of Destiny was in his pocket, but raising a group of hell creatures couldn't be hidden from others. What if his old leader reported him, and then the 4 major armies descended from the sky and wiped him out? Distortion in the present realm? Crow was amused. Silly boy, I'm not looking down on you. Even if you directly freeze now, you won't be a threat to the present realm. Besides, raising demons and ghosts in the abyss is a tradition of the Utopia, okay? In the past, they treated hell like a pigsty, raising waves and killing waves, as if they were harvesting leeks. If they really wanted to investigate this, it wouldn't be your turn even if they killed the top 100. You can rest assured and boldly earn correction points. Even if this world is in trouble, it's definitely not your fault alone. Correction points, degree of distortion. Both were terms for change, a unit to quantify the change in the present realm, and at the same time, a factor to measure the depth. The changes in miracles and disasters all depended on this. Crow didn't say much about this, but simply told Huaishir straightforwardly, if the change is good, then it can generally be called a correction. If this change is bad, then it can be called a distortion. The two are not constant, and sometimes they transform and image each other. The specific calculation method is probably only known by the department in charge of the Doomsday Clock in the Continuation Institute. You just need to know one thing. The higher the correction value, the closer this world is to paradise, Crow said. And the higher the degree of distortion, the closer this world is to hell. Huaishir suddenly understood. The two cancel each other out and form the current situation, right? I understand. Crow didn't say anything, just looked at him in confusion, until he realized that something was wrong. What's wrong? No, I just found out that you might have misunderstood something. Crow raised his wings and scratched his little head. After a long silence, he asked, do you think that the two values are actually two sides of the same coin, like two ends of a scale, and the weight can cancel each other out? Isn't that the case? Huaishir felt that something was wrong. I also hope that's the case, but unfortunately, it's not. Crow sighed. The saddest thing is the two sides are actually calculated separately. There is no positive and negative cancellation, no balance between good and evil. Huaishir, the two exist together, and they both bring about their own effects. This world existed between two extremes. Just like the rope in a tug-of-war competition, it was infinitely close to paradise, and at the same time, infinitely close to hell, so wildly wandering between the two. Perhaps it belonged to both at the same time, but at the same time, it was more difficult to distinguish. In the long silence, Huaishir stood in place. He recalled the scene he saw in his dream when he advanced, the glorious appearance, the countless gorgeous borders surrounding the outside, the dark abyss, and the barren world in the deepest part of hell, everything that died. In a vague trance, he seemed to understand something, but it was difficult to understand. What exactly is hell? He looked at Crow blankly. What level and what kind of world can truly be called hell? Such a simple question, but it made Crow fall into silence. After a long time, she said softly, "Why, sure, the so-called hell is a place that has lost change." Change. Yes, change. It doesn't matter if you call it entropy, increase, or heat death. At that level, everything will become a pool of stagnant water, falling into eternal solidification, and should end. She said, to be more precise, it should be a world that has reached the end, a world that used to be, a world that has long since died, a place where there is no hope or future. When a world dies, the wreckage it leaves behind is hell. At that time, everything you see is an outline that has long been unrecognizable compared to the past. The ashes left behind after the beautiful past that is worthy of praise have been burned out after a long time. The records of its original appearance have been lost, the tombstones and tombs of a world, the final destination of all things. The old world ushers in destruction, is buried, and is together with the past. Then a new world rises from the ground in hell, ushering in a new tomorrow, until tomorrow no longer comes. Everything will change, and everything will stop changing, just like the stars will fall. The sun will go out, and heroes will usher in death. Layers of the old world are constantly buried, turning into fossils hidden deep under the earth, sinking into eternal darkness. During this long narration, she stared at her contractor and told him word by word, "I think this should be hell. Why, sure." After the conversation in the morning ended, Weischer's mood fell into depression. He couldn't work up any energy. He sat on the sofa in a daze, basking in the sun outside the window. After some time, he fell asleep. When he was awakened by the sound outside the window, it was already afternoon. He got up from the sofa, folded the blanket that Feng Shu quietly covered him with, walked to the window, and saw a vast expanse of silver. Countless pure, white snow powder rustled down from the sky in the wind, stained the window, and melted in the warm air of the air conditioner. It left on the windowsill, condensing into wisps of frost. Unbelievable. Weischer raised his hand and pressed it on the window. He felt the actual cold temperature, but he still couldn't believe everything in front of him. "It's snowing." "Yes." In the corner of the living room, the crow hummed, rolled up small flowers and decorations, and jumped up and down to dress up the enamel bird cage that she bought from the antique shop. "When you advanced, you slept for half a month." She turned around and said, "Tomorrow is New Year's Day, haven't you noticed?" Weischer took out his phone from his pocket and stared at the date with wide eyes. December 31st. It's New Year's Day? It felt like he had slept for a long time. And when he opened his eyes, the whole world was different. Weischer pushed open the door. In the cold wind, he felt cool and comfortable. In the courtyard, the fat horse that had never seen snow before was holding Beelzebub in its mouth and running around excitedly, neighing loudly. Weischer scratched his head helplessly. He studied the horse's silhouette, which had become rounder in a while. Suddenly, he had a headache. "It's so fat. What did Feng Shu feed it? It's so fat. Can it still run in the future? If I ride it out in the future, I'll probably be called the Prince of Fat Horses, right?" Sensing its underling's disrespectful gaze, the white horse snorted coldly. It raised its nostrils and blew 2 streams of hot air in his face. Then it raised its head proudly and turned to leave. Yes, it was holding the screaming Beelzebub in its mouth. For some reason, it quite liked this new toy. It treated it like a tape recorder. Whenever it was bored, it would kick it and wait for it to do crosstalk and storytelling. Fine. Huaisher helplessly looked at the iron book that the horse kept spitting out fragrant sounds from its mouth. He waved his hand, telling it to pray for itself. In this family, even the horse's status was higher than his. He really couldn't live like this. But when the snow fell on his shoulders, he felt the cold and the noisy scene in the city at the foot of the mountain in the distance. Huaisher's mood instantly brightened. Reaching out to catch the falling snowflakes, he sighed deeply. It's almost New Year's Day. Time flew by so quickly, but now, when he looked around, it felt so long. In July, he became a ascender. In August, he took revenge and killed Chi-Wan. At the end of August, he was on Mayflower. In September, he ran to the rookie competition. Then, it was the Night of the Witch. Then, it was Stellaris. After going around in circles, he finally became the young arbiter of life. It only took him 5 months. It was so short, but when he recalled it, he felt so fulfilled. It was like sitting on a roller coaster, rushing forward all the way. He couldn't even find the place to stop. While his life was completely different, it also became so busy and noisy. He realized his wish had a family and obtained power. Before the age of 17, he longed for a change in his life. But when this change came, he didn't expect it to be so violent. It could be predicted that there would be constant changes in the future, right? His life would continue like this. Just like this world would continue to run. Everything would change. Maybe one day, death would come as promised. But for him, wasn't it too early to worry about such a distant thing? In the gradually falling snow, Huaisher couldn't help but chuckle softly. He casually threw away the snowflakes on his fingertips. He turned and walked into the house, waiting for the arrival of New Year. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.